All right, let's dive into something pretty profound today.
Sounds good to me.
The Noble Eightfold Path.
Okay.
I've got some excerpts here that you sent over.
Great.
From H. The Noble Eightfold Path, The Wings to Awakening, ThammaTalks.org. And wow, the title alone, makes me want to grab a meditation cushion and get all zen. But before we get ahead of ourselves, can you just break it down?
Sure.
What is this path and what makes it so noble?
Well, it's really the core of Buddhist practice.
Right.
It's not just some good ideas, strung together. It's really 8 interconnected principles that if you really commit to them, they say will lead you to enlightenment.
Wow.
And the noble part comes in because when all 8 of these principles are fully developed, you're on the fast track to stream entry, which is the first major step towards awakening.
So not just a walk in the park, it's like a serious journey with a destination.
Absolutely.
And these are the tools to get us there.
That's a good way to think about it.
Okay.
And what's really interesting is that this path actually has 2 layers to it.
Okay.
So on the beginning level, you're consciously working on each of these 8 factors, trying to get better, one step at a time. But then there's this deeper level, this noble level, where everything just clicks into place and you're no longer doing the path, but you're being the path.
Wow, okay.
And it just effortlessly carries you towards the deathless, which is the ultimate freedom from suffering.
That reminds me of learning to drive, right?
Right, okay.
At first you're thinking about every single step, checking your mirrors,
Yeah.
Really concentrating.
Yeah.
But then with practice, it becomes almost second nature. You're not putting in so much effort.
Right.
You're just in the flow.
Precisely.
Okay.
Now, to really get a grip on the structure of this path, we need to understand what are called the 3 aggregates.
Okay.
Discernment, virtue, and concentration.
Okay, pop quiz time. What are these aggregates?
All right, well.
And how do they relate to the Eightfold Path?
Each aggregate has a set of path factors within it.
Okay.
So discernment starts us off with right view and right resolve.
Okay.
It's figuring out what is true and then making the commitment to act on it. Then virtue includes right speech, right action, and right livelihood. So basically how we behave in the world.
Okay.
And lastly, concentration brings in right effort, right mindfulness, and right concentration.
Okay.
So these are really the mental tools that help us stay focused and present.
Okay, hold on a second.
Sure.
You keep saying write this and write that.
Right.
Does that mean any old view or any kind of concentration is good enough?
Well, that's where it gets really interesting.
Okay.
Each of these 8 factors actually exists on 2 levels.
Okay.
A mundane level and a noble level. And that rightness that you're picking up on is what sets the noble apart from the mundane.
So what's the difference between the 2 levels then?
Well, think of the mundane level as kind of laying the groundwork.
Okay.
You're starting to clean up your act, making better choices, but you're still prone to falling back into old habits, like tidying up your house.
Right.
It looks good for a little while, but without those deeper changes, it gets messy again.
Yeah.
But the noble level is where real transformation happens.
Okay.
These factors, they become purified, free from those mental knots that keep us tied to suffering. And they actually propel us towards liberation.
So it's we have to tend to that mundane level first.
Right.
Like nurturing a garden.
Absolutely,
before it can blossom into something truly beautiful.
Yeah. Perfect analogy.
Okay.
Let's take right view as an example.
Okay.
At the mundane level.
Okay.
It's about embracing some core beliefs, understanding karma, knowing good actions from bad, recognizing that there's more to life than just this physical existence, honoring our parents, and trusting those who have walked the path before us.
Wait a minute.
Sure.
There's one part there that I want to ask about. Spontaneously reborn beings.
Great question.
What is that?
That's where the mundane level of understanding really bumps up against some profound ideas. It's the idea that not all beings are born and reborn in the typical way. Some, due to actions in past lives, just appear.
So they're not born from a mother.
It's a bit like a seed sprouting without needing to be planted.
Okay.
This is part of what makes understanding karma and rebirth so complex. There are these subtle layers to it.
Okay.
But we can delve deeper into that later on.
I think I need a minute to process that one.
Sure.
But it does highlight how much deeper this path goes.
Exactly.
It's not just like a do this, don't do that.
Yeah.
It's about our whole understanding of the world.
It is. And to really put these beliefs into action, you need right effort.
Okay, so how does effort fit into all of this?
Sure.
Becoming enlightened.
It's not exactly a workout plan.
Okay.
But more like a focused intention to become skillful.
Okay.
This is where the concept of holographic development comes in.
Okay.
Each path factor needs 3 key ingredients. Right view to know what's right.
Okay.
Right effort to cultivate the good and abandon the bad. And right mindfulness to keep us from getting distracted.
So it's this constant balancing act of being wise, putting in the work, and staying present.
Exactly. And these 3 are woven throughout the entire path. They're the fuel that keeps us moving forward.
So assuming we manage to cultivate these 8 factors and somehow keep those 3 things in balance, what happens next? Is that when we hit stream entry?
That's precisely it. When all 8 factors on that deeper noble level come together, they create this incredible synergy.
Okay.
That's stream entry.
Okay.
The first glimpse of true awakening.
So it's like a cosmic equation where all the variables have to align perfectly.
That's one way to think about it.
Okay.
But the journey doesn't end there.
Wait, there's more after achieving a state of awakening.
Oh yes, much more. But we can dive into those details later.
Okay.
First, let's explore some of these path factors in a little more depth.
Okay.
Starting with right effort.
Okay.
I'm curious, what are your initial thoughts on this idea of right effort? What does that even mean to you?
Honestly, when I hear effort, I think of pushing myself, maybe even straining, but something tells me that's not quite what we're talking about here, is it?
You're right. It's not about brute force.
Okay.
Right effort is much more about cultivating a specific mindset, one of persistent dedication. The source material describes it as applying ourselves to developing skillful qualities while diligently abandoning those that cause harm.
So it's about being mindful of where we're directing our energy.
Exactly. And the source material goes on to say that right effort has 4 key aspects.
All right, hit me with those 4 aspects. I'm ready.
All right. First is preventing unskillful qualities from arising in the first place. It's like recognizing those unhelpful patterns before they take over.
Okay.
Second is abandoning unskillful qualities that have already popped up.
Okay.
Think of it like weeding your mental garden.
Okay.
Third is generating skillful qualities that haven't blossomed yet.
Okay.
This is where we actively plant those seeds of wisdom and compassion. And lastly, strengthening those skillful qualities that are already present.
Okay.
It's like nurturing those plants so they can flourish.
Wow, that's a whole lot more nuanced than just trying hard.
Yeah.
It's really about understanding what needs tending to in our mental landscape.
It is.
It makes me wonder how mindfulness plays into all of this.
Excellent segue. Right. Mindfulness, as you might guess, is all about being present and aware.
Yeah.
The source material emphasizes focusing on the body, feelings, mind, and mental qualities.
So it's about observing all of those things without getting swept away by them.
Precisely. And it's not just passively observing.
Right.
It's about seeing those things clearly, without judgment, and noticing how they influence our actions.
Okay.
It's like becoming an inner scientist, studying the workings of your own mind.
That's pretty cool.
Yeah.
I can see how that kind of awareness, fueled by right effort,
Yes.
and guided by right view,
Yes.
would help us to make better choices.
Absolutely.
Like, it's all starting to connect now.
They all work together like a well-oiled machine.
Okay.
Now, right concentration is where things get really interesting.
Okay.
It involves reaching these states of deep meditative absorption called jhanas.
Okay, confession time.
Sure.
I've heard jhanas whispered about, in yoga classes and things like that.
Yeah.
But I've never really understood what they were. Can you demystify those for me?
Absolutely. Jhanas are these profoundly peaceful and focused states of mind that are cultivated through meditation. And the source material actually beautifully describes the progression through these jhanas.
Okay.
You start with a feeling of rapture and pleasure, but eventually you transcend even those and arrive at a state of pure equanimity and mindfulness.
Wow.
It's a state where there's neither clinging to pleasure nor aversion to pain. Just pure, clear awareness.
Okay, you're making me want to drop everything and go meditate right now.
It truly is a remarkable experience.
Okay.
And it's important to remember that right concentration isn't about escaping the world.
Okay.
It's about training your mind to be so steady and clear that you can then engage with the world skillfully and compassionately.
So you're not checking out. You're becoming more equipped to show up.
Exactly. It's like going to the gym for your mind.
Okay.
And speaking of skillful engagement, let's talk about right speech.
Bring it on. I think we could all use a little more skillful communication these days.
I agree. Right speech is all about speaking in a way that's, well, beneficial,
Okay.
not harmful at the mundane level. It's about avoiding harmful speech. The source material specifically lists abstaining from lying,
Okay.
divisive speech, abusive language,
Right.
and pointless chatter.
Okay, so basically not being a jerk.
Right.
Got it. But I have a feeling that the noble level takes us a step further.
You are right on the money.
Okay.
At the noble level, right speech becomes more than just holding back from negativity.
Okay.
It's really about speaking from that deep well of clarity and compassion that we've been cultivating through the other path factors.
Right.
So your words become inherently truthful, harmonious, and genuinely helpful to those around you.
So it's almost like your speech becomes a natural extension of your awakened mind.
That's a beautiful way to put it.
Not just words,
Yeah.
but an embodiment of that wisdom and kindness.
And this same principle applies to right action and right livelihood. It's not just about following a set of external rules. It's really about aligning your actions and the way you make a living with those core values and aspirations that you've clarified through right view
Right.
and strengthened through right effort.
Okay, I'm starting to see the bigger picture here.
Good.
The Noble Eightfold Path isn't just about, meditating on a mountaintop.
Right.
It's really a blueprint for how to live a truly awakened life.
Exactly.
And everything we do, how we act, what we say, how we earn a living, it's all connected.
Precisely. And what's remarkable is that while it's presented as a path with these distinct stages, each factor is so deeply interconnected.
Right.
They each influence and support the others.
Okay.
Creating this beautiful tapestry of wisdom and compassion.
I like that tapestry analogy, each thread.
Right.
Each factor adds its own, unique color and texture to the whole design.
Exactly. And one of the threads that really stood out to me in the source material was this emphasis on abandoning wrong views. It states that, by abandoning wrong views, we can actually break free from a whole host of unskillful qualities that stem from those wrong views.
So it's not just about adopting the right perspective.
Right.
It's also about actively letting go of those harmful beliefs and perspectives.
Exactly.
That might be holding us back.
It's like cleaning out your mental closet and getting rid of all those outdated and ill-fitting clothes.
I like that. Yeah, it's about recognizing that sometimes. The things we're clinging to are the very things that are keeping us stuck.
Precisely.
This whole idea of letting go seems to be a recurring theme here.
It is.
And it makes me think about something you mentioned earlier.
Okay.
The story of the raft from the source material.
Ah, yes. A raft is such a powerful analogy.
Yeah.
The Buddha used this story to illustrate that even the Dharma, the teachings themselves, should be treated like a raft. It's a tool to help us cross over to the other shore, to liberation.
Okay.
But it's not meant to be clung to once we arrive.
So you use the teachings to navigate the rough waters.
Exactly.
But once you reach solid ground,
yes,
you don't keep lugging that raft around with you.
Exactly. It's about recognizing that even helpful tools have their limitations. We can become so attached to certain practices or beliefs or even our understanding of the Dharma itself. And that attachment can actually become an obstacle to further progress.
Okay, so in a way, even enlightenment itself isn't something to cling to.
Right. It's a state of being, a way of moving through the world.
Okay.
Not a trophy to put on a shelf.
Okay, I think I'm starting to get it.
Good.
So it's about embodying these principles, letting them transform us.
Yes.
And then letting go of the process itself.
That's it.
Wow, that's a lot to take in.
It is.
But it's also incredibly liberating.
Oh.
It makes me think about how we can apply these teachings to our everyday lives.
Absolutely.
How do we start to integrate this into our daily routine?
Right.
It almost feels too big.
I understand. That's a great question and a very common concern.
Yeah.
But it doesn't have to be overwhelming.
Okay.
Remember, the path is about progress, not perfection. It's about those small, consistent steps that you take each day. Okay. It can be as simple as starting your day with a few minutes of mindfulness practice. Paying attention to your breath, or consciously choosing to speak kindly to those around you.
So even small actions can be part of cultivating a more awakened way of being.
Absolutely. And those small actions over time have a ripple effect. They start to shift your perspective, shape your choices, and ultimately lead to profound change.
You know, when you mentioned right effort earlier, I have to admit, I had a little bit of an internal groan.
Really?
Because I just picture myself struggling to force myself to do things I don't enjoy.
Right.
But the way you explained it, with those 4 aspects, it makes a lot more sense.
Good.
It's more about being intentional.
It is.
Than just forcing things.
Exactly. And the beauty of right effort is that it can be applied to so many different areas of life. For example, you mentioned earlier that you've been struggling with work-life balance.
Oh, tell me about it. Some days it feels like I'm juggling chainsaws.
I hear you.
While riding a unicycle.
Well, this concept of right effort could actually offer a new perspective on that struggle. Instead of just thinking about trying harder. What if you applied those 4 aspects of right effort to your work-life balance?
How so?
Well, firstly, preventing unskillful qualities from arising could look like setting clear boundaries between work time and personal time. Maybe turning off notifications after a certain hour. Secondly, abandoning unskillful qualities could be recognizing.
When you're starting to feel overwhelmed.
Right.
And taking a break before you burn out. Thirdly, generating skillful qualities. Could be proactively scheduling time for activities that bring you joy and rejuvenation.
Right.
And lastly, strengthening those skillful qualities could be about prioritizing self-care practices that help you stay grounded and centered.
Wow, that's actually a really helpful way to look at it.
Yeah.
It's not about becoming some superhuman multitasker.
Right.
It's about making conscious choices that align with my values and my well-being.
And you can apply this same framework to any area of your life where you're feeling stuck or struggling. It's about bringing that mindful awareness to your actions.
Right.
And making choices that support your overall well-being.
That's incredibly practical.
Yeah.
Makes me think about right mindfulness in a whole new light. It's not just about sitting on a cushion, focusing on your breath.
It's about bringing that awareness to every aspect of our lives.
Precisely. And that's where the interconnectedness of the path really shines through. Each factor supports and reinforces the others.
Right.
Mindfulness helps you recognize when right effort is needed. Right view guides you in making choices that are aligned with your values and so on. It's this beautiful dynamic dance between all 8 factors.
I like that. Speaking of interconnectedness.
Sure.
You mentioned earlier that the journey doesn't end with stream entry.
Right.
There are those further stages of awakening, once returning, non-returning, and finally, arahantship.
Yes.
Can you break those down for me?
Certainly. Each of these stages represents a deepening of realization, a further liberation from suffering, and a greater embodiment of wisdom and compassion.
So it's not like you flip a switch and you're suddenly enlightened.
No.
It's more like an ongoing process.
Exactly. It's like climbing a mountain. Each stage offers a wider, more breathtaking view. There's always another peak to aspire to. Once returning, as the name implies, suggests that an individual will only be reborn once more in the realm of suffering before attaining full liberation. They've significantly weakened their attachment to worldly desires, and their sense of self is much less solid.
So fewer trips around the karmic wheel.
Right.
That's a pretty good deal.
It is indeed. Then comes non-returning. Someone at this stage is no longer bound to be reborn in the realm of suffering.
Wow.
They've fully transcended the cycle of birth and death, and they will attain nirvana upon death.
Wow, that's some serious liberation.
It is.
But what about arahantship? Is that like the final destination?
Arahantship is the complete and utter cessation of suffering. The full realization of enlightenment. It's the culmination of the path. Where all attachments have been severed, and the mind rests in perfect peace and clarity.
So it's like reaching the summit of Mount Everest?
Yes.
These stages represent an ever-deepening liberation from suffering.
Yes.
And a greater embodiment of wisdom and compassion.
That's a fantastic way to put it. And remember, the Noble Eightfold Path is the guidebook, the map, and the toolkit for this incredible journey. It's available to everyone, regardless of their background or beliefs.
Okay, I'm starting to grasp the vastness and the potential here.
Good.
But I also know that a lot of our listeners are probably thinking, this all sounds great in theory, but how do I actually put this into practice in my real life?
That's a fair question, and I think one of the most important things to remember is that the Noble Eightfold Path is not about becoming a perfect person.
Okay.
It's not about adhering to a rigid set of rules or striving for some unattainable ideal.
So it's not about beating ourselves up.
Exactly.
For every misstep.
It's about cultivating a more awakened way of being, one that's characterized by wisdom, compassion, and a deep understanding of the nature of reality.
Yeah.
It's about embracing our imperfections and striving to do our best, knowing that we're all on this journey of growth and learning together.
It's about progress, not perfection. I love that.
And it's about being kind to ourselves along the way. You know, each step we take on the path,
Yeah.
no matter how small, is a step in the right direction.
Now, that's a message that really resonates.
Good.
It's encouraging and empowering.
It is.
And it makes this whole path feel much more accessible.
Yeah, good.
You know, you mentioned earlier that right speech becomes this natural expression of an awakened mind.
Right.
But let's be real.
Sure.
We live in a world where communication can be so tricky these days.
I agree.
Especially online.
Right.
So how do you practice right speech in the age of social media?
That's a really important question and a perfect example of how these ancient teachings can be applied to modern challenges. The core principles of right speech, you know, truthfulness, kindness, and usefulness are just as relevant today as they were thousands of years ago.
So it's not about avoiding social media altogether.
Right.
It's about bringing mindfulness to our interactions online.
Before you hit send on that comment or post, pause for a moment and ask yourself, is this true?
Okay.
Is this kind? Is this helpful?
Okay.
And if the answer to any of those questions is no,
yeah,
maybe it's best to reconsider your words.
Okay, that's actually a pretty simple but powerful guideline.
It is.
It's so easy to get caught up in the heat of the moment.
It is.
Online and say things we later regret.
It's true.
So right speech then becomes like a digital detox.
I love that.
For our communication.
Digital detox for communication. It's about being mindful of the energy we're putting out into the world, whether it's through our words, our actions, or even our online presence.
It's about recognizing that even in the digital realm, we're still all interconnected.
We are.
And our words have power.
They do.
To impact others.
Precisely. And speaking of impact, I think it's important to highlight that the Noble Eightfold Path isn't just about personal transformation.
Okay.
It's also about creating a more just and compassionate world.
That's an important point. How does the path contribute to that bigger picture?
Well, the path is deeply intertwined with ethical conduct and social responsibility. You know, right speech, right action, and right livelihood all call for us to act in ways that benefit not only ourselves, but also others. It encourages us to cultivate compassion, loving kindness, and a deep concern for the welfare of all beings.
So it's about recognizing our interconnectedness.
Yes.
And understanding that our actions have consequences.
I do.
That what we do and say has a ripple effect that extends far beyond ourselves.
Exactly. And those ripples can create positive change. The path calls for us to act with integrity, generosity, and a commitment to justice. It's a beautiful and inspiring vision of a world where everyone can flourish.
And it all starts with those individual efforts to cultivate wisdom, compassion, and ethical conduct.
It does. It's kind of like Gandhi's famous quote, be the change you want to see in the world.
Perfectly said. The more we embody these qualities in our own lives, the more we contribute to creating a world where peace, justice and compassion can truly prevail.
They can.
Now, I'm curious. For those who are just beginning to explore this path, what are some common misconceptions about the Noble Eightfold Path they might need to let go of?
That's a great question. And one common misconception is that the path is all about renouncing the world and living a life of austerity and isolation. You know, people picture monks in robes, meditating in caves, completely detached from society.
So it's not about retreating from life and becoming a monk or a nun.
Not necessarily.
Does that mean I have to give up my Netflix subscription?
Haha, no, not necessarily. While monastic life is certainly one expression of the path,
Okay.
it's not the only one.
Okay.
Remember, the Buddhist teachings are for everyone, regardless of their lifestyle
Okay.
or circumstances.
So the path can be practiced by anyone.
Absolutely.
Anywhere.
Yes,
Even in the middle of a bustling city.
absolutely. It's about finding a way to integrate these principles into your daily life, whatever that may look like.
Okay.
And this leads to another common misconception,
Okay.
that the path is about achieving some perfect state of enlightenment
Okay.
where all problems magically disappear.
So no superpowers or immunity to life's curveball.
I'm afraid not.
Okay.
The path acknowledges the reality of suffering, but it offers tools for navigating it skillfully
Okay.
and finding greater peace and freedom amidst life's inevitable challenges.
Okay.
It's about developing resilience, finding joy even in the midst of difficulties, and responding to challenges with wisdom and compassion.
So it's not about escaping life's storms.
Right.
It's about learning how to weather them with grace and strength.
Beautifully put.
Okay.
And that resilience comes from cultivating wisdom, compassion, and a deep understanding of the nature of reality.
Okay.
It's about recognizing that suffering is a part of life, but it doesn't have to define us.
You know, when we were talking about right view earlier, you mentioned understanding karma.
Yes,
And that's a concept that often gets misunderstood.
it is.
You know, people think it's about some cosmic punishment system.
Right.
Can you clear that up for us?
Absolutely. Karma is often misunderstood as some kind of cosmic reward or punishment system, but it's actually much more nuanced than that.
Okay.
In essence, karma simply means action and its consequences.
Correct.
It's about understanding that every action we take, every thought we think, every word we speak creates ripples that extend outwards, impacting both ourselves and the world around us.
So it's not about some divine being keeping score.
No.
It's more about cause and effect playing out over time.
Exactly. It's about recognizing that our actions have consequences, both positive and negative, and that those consequences shape our experiences.
So if we want to create a more positive and fulfilling life, both for ourselves and for others, we need to be mindful of the actions we're taking,
Yeah.
the thoughts we're thinking, the words we're speaking.
Precisely. And that mindfulness is cultivated through the practice of right mindfulness.
Okay, that makes a lot more sense.
Good.
So karma is not about punishment.
Right.
It's about understanding the interconnectedness of all things and taking responsibility for our actions.
And that sense of responsibility is a key element of the Noble Eightfold Path. It's about recognizing that we have the power to create positive change in the world, starting with ourselves.
Now, we've been talking a lot about the individual aspects of the past,
Right.
but I'm curious to know more about the overall progression. How do these different stages of awakening unfold in a person's life? Is it a linear process?
Right.
Or is it more like a winding path with unexpected turns?
That's a fascinating question.
Yeah.
And one that doesn't have a simple answer. You know, the path is often described in stages. But it's important to remember that this is just a framework to help us understand the process.
Okay.
In reality, the journey of awakening is unique for each individual.
Okay.
You know, it can be linear for some, with those clear milestones and breakthroughs,
Right.
while for others it might feel more like a spiral, with periods of progress followed by periods of seeming stagnation or even regression.
So it's not about comparing ourselves to others or getting caught up
Yeah.
in some idealized timeline.
Exactly. It's about trusting our own unique journey and honoring wherever we are on the path.
That's reassuring to hear.
Oh, good.
It kind of takes the pressure off, trying to achieve some, preconceived notion of what enlightenment should look like.
Right.
Speaking of preconceived notions, one of the things I find most intriguing about Buddhism is this idea of non-self, or anatta.
Yes,
It seems to go against everything we're taught in Western culture,
it does.
which really emphasizes individuality
Right.
and self-reliance.
Right.
Can you shed some light on this concept?
Absolutely. The concept of non-self is one of the most profound and challenging teachings in Buddhism. It directly challenges our ingrained notion
Okay.
of a separate, independent self, an I that exists independently of everything else.
So you're saying that our sense of self, that feeling of I-ness, that we all experience is actually an illusion.
In a way, yes. It's not that we don't exist.
Okay.
Or that our experiences aren't real, but rather that our sense of self is actually a construct, a product of constantly changing mental and physical processes.
Okay, my brain is doing a little gymnastics right now trying to wrap my head around that.
I understand.
But how does understanding non-self actually benefit us?
That's a great question.
What are the practical implications?
Understanding non-self can be incredibly liberating.
Okay.
Because it frees us from the suffering that arises from clinging to a fixed, unchanging identity.
Yeah.
You know, when we believe in a separate self, we tend to grasp at things that we think will make us happy and push away things that we think will cause us pain.
So it's all about attachment and aversion.
Exactly.
Those are two things I can definitely relate to.
I think we all can. But when we really see through the illusion of self, we realize that this grasping and aversion is ultimately futile, you know, and we can start to let go of those attachments.
Right.
And embrace the ever-changing nature of reality.
So by understanding non-self, we actually become more adaptable and resilient.
Precisely. We become less reactive to life's ups and downs because we're not so invested in maintaining a particular image of ourselves.
Okay.
You know, we can flow with life's changes more easily without feeling like we're losing something essential.
That's incredibly freeing.
It is.
It's like taking off a heavy suit of armor.
That's a perfect analogy.
That you didn't even realize you were wearing.
And this sense of freedom allows us to connect with others more authentically and compassionately.
Because we're not so caught up in our own ego.
Exactly. We can see ourselves in others, recognize our shared humanity, and cultivate a deep sense of interconnectedness.
Okay, so I'm starting to see how understanding non-self isn't just this philosophical concept.
Yeah.
It's a really powerful tool for personal transformation.
It is.
And creating a more harmonious world.
Absolutely. It's a fundamental shift in perspective that can have profound implications for how we live our lives.
Now, we've covered a lot of ground today.
We have.
From those individual path factors to the deeper concepts of stream entry, karma, and non-self.
Yes.
But there's one thing we haven't talked about yet.
Okay.
The final stage of awakening, arahantship.
Right.
What distinguishes this stage from the previous ones?
Okay.
And how do we even begin to approach this level of realization?
Arahantship is the ultimate goal of the Buddhist path.
Okay.
It's a state of complete liberation from suffering, where all attachments have been severed, and the mind rests in perfect peace and clarity. It's difficult to grasp conceptually because it's said to be beyond the realm of ordinary experience.
Okay.
But the path offers a way to gradually move towards that state, step by step, through the cultivation of wisdom, compassion, and ethical conduct.
So it's not about becoming a superhuman being.
Right.
Or achieving some kind of magical state.
No.
This is amazing how much depth there is to this path.
It's true, yeah.
It's like peeling back the layers of an onion, each layer revealing a new insight and a deeper understanding.
The beauty of the Noble Eightfold Path is that it's both profound and practical.
Okay.
It offers a framework for understanding the nature of reality and a set of tools for transforming ourselves and the world around us.
And it's not a one-size-fits-all approach?
Right.
There's room for individual expression and interpretation?
Absolutely. The path is a guide, not a set of rigid rules. You know, it's about finding what works for you, adapting the principles. Right.
To your own unique circumstances.
Okay.
And personality.
That makes it feel a lot less intimidating.
Good.
I think a lot of people, when they heard about Buddhism, they think it's all about these strict rules and rituals, but it's really about cultivating a certain way of being.
Exactly. Right. It's about aligning our thoughts, our words, and actions with wisdom and compassion.
Okay.
It's about waking up to the reality of our interconnectedness and living in a way that benefits all beings.
Speaking of waking up, can we circle back to those stages of awakening?
Absolutely.
We touched on them earlier, but I'd love to hear a little bit more about the nuances of each stage.
Sure.
What really sets them apart?
Certainly. So as we discussed, the path unfolds in stages, each one representing a deepening of realization and a further liberation from suffering.
Okay.
Stream entry, the first stage, is kind of like a breakthrough moment.
It's the point where you really catch a glimpse of your true nature and see the path clearly for the first time. You know, it's a taste of freedom, but there's still work to be done.
So it's like the starting line of a marathon.
Perfect analogy.
You're excited, you've got momentum, but you've got a long way to go.
Once returning, the next stage is marked by a significant decrease in the power of greed, hatred, and delusion.
So those unwholesome qualities, they still arise, but they don't have the same grip on you anymore.
They don't. You're able to see them more clearly and let them go more easily.
So you're less reactive, more balanced.
Exactly, yeah. You're less likely to get swept away by strong emotions and more likely to respond to challenges with wisdom and compassion.
And then comes non-returning.
Yes.
A stage where you've completely eradicated those three poisons: greed, hatred, and delusion.
That's right.
So you've basically mastered your mind.
In a sense, yes.
At this stage, you've attained a profound level of peace and freedom.
You have.
You're no longer bound by that cycle of birth and death.
Right.
And you'll attain nirvana upon death.
Yes.
Wow, that's incredible.
It is.
And finally, there's arahantship. What makes this stage the ultimate goal?
Arahantship is the complete and utter cessation of suffering. It's the full realization of enlightenment, where all attachments have been severed, and the mind rests in perfect peace and clarity. It's a state that's really beyond description. It's something that can only be experienced directly.
It sounds like reaching a state of pure bliss and liberation.
It is. And while it might seem like an impossible goal, the path offers a way to gradually move towards that state, you know, step by step, through the cultivation of wisdom, compassion, and ethical conduct.
And it all starts with that first step, right?
It does.
With choosing to walk the path, even if we stumble along the way.
Exactly. The path is about progress, not perfection.
Right.
It's about making that commitment to live a more awakened life and trusting that the process itself will transform us.
Now, you mentioned that the path is not just about personal transformation, but also about creating a more just and compassionate world.
Yes.
Can you elaborate on that a little bit?
Sure.
How do these individual practices actually translate into social change?
That's a great question. The Noble Eightfold Path isn't just a set of personal practices. It's really a blueprint for creating a more harmonious and just society. And each path factor actually has social implications.
Can you give me some examples?
Certainly. Speech, for example, encourages us to communicate with kindness and honesty. You know, to avoid gossip and harmful speech. And this really helps to create a more peaceful and harmonious social environment. Right. Action encourages us to act with integrity and compassion, you know, to refrain from harming others.
So no more road rage.
Exactly.
Or cutting in line.
And livelihood encourages us to engage in work that is ethical and beneficial to society.
So choosing a career path that aligns with our values.
Precisely.
And contributes to the greater good.
Exactly. And these individual practices, when practiced collectively, create this ripple effect that can transform entire communities and even the world at large.
So it's like that old saying, think globally, act locally.
Right.
By transforming ourselves. We're contributing to transforming the world around us.
That's a beautiful way to put it. And it's a reminder that we all have a role to play in creating a more just and compassionate world.
Now, I know we've covered a lot of ground today.
We have.
But there's one more thing I want to touch on. Before we wrap up, the source material you provided emphasizes this importance of letting go.
Right.
Not just of wrong views, but also of attachments to things, ideas, even the Dharma itself.
Yes.
Can you explain why letting go is so crucial on this path?
That's an excellent point. Letting go is essential for spiritual progress. You know, as we move along the path, we inevitably develop attachments to certain practices, beliefs, or even our understanding of the Dharma.
Right.
But these attachments can actually become obstacles to further growth.
So we can get attached even to the things that are supposed to be helping us.
That's right. It's like clinging to a raft after you've reached the shore.
Okay.
You know, the raft was helpful in getting you across the river.
Right.
But once you're on solid ground,
Yeah.
it's time to let go.
So how do we learn to let go of those attachments? It's easy to say, just let go, but it's a lot harder to actually do.
It is, but it's a practice, just like any other aspect of the path.
Okay.
It really starts with awareness.
Okay.
You know, noticing when we're clinging, when we're feeling resistant to change, you know, when we're holding on too tightly to a particular idea or belief.
So it's about cultivating a sense of detachment without becoming indifferent or apathetic.
Exactly. It's about finding that delicate balance between engaging with the world fully and holding things lightly without grasping or clinging.
It's like learning to dance with life.
That's beautiful.
Rather than trying to control every step.
And this ability to let go is ultimately what leads to true freedom and liberation.
This has been an incredible journey.
It has.
I feel like I've learned so much about the Noble Eightfold Path, not just intellectually, but also on a deeper, more experiential level.
I'm glad to hear that.
What final message would you like to leave our listeners with?
My message is simple. The path to awakening is open to everyone. It's not a distant, unattainable goal,
Right.
but a journey that begins with a single step. You know, if you're feeling lost, confused, or overwhelmed by life's challenges, the Noble Eightfold Path offers a way out of suffering and a path towards greater peace, joy, and freedom.
It's a reminder that we don't have to go it alone.
We don't.
There's a path, there's a guide, and there's a community of fellow travelers to support us along the way.
Beautifully said. And if the Noble Eightfold Path is a journey toward awakening, what small step can you take today to begin walking that path?
Keep diving deep, and until next time, keep exploring.
Welcome, everyone. Ready to dive deep into something pretty fascinating. We're tackling the 7 factors of awakening today.
Sounds intriguing.
We're looking at excerpts from, let me see, the 7 Factors for Awakening. It's on dhammatalks.org.
Okay, yeah.
It's like we're going to uncover this like mental toolkit for, you know, more clarity, maybe even like liberation, you know?
I like where this is going. These factors, they're pretty central to Buddhist thought, you know?
Yeah, and the source, it gives us these 2 really cool ways to picture them. Like 1, imagine a spiral staircase leading to higher understanding. And then 2, it's like a holographic image where everything's like interconnected.
Both are actually useful. That spiral staircase, it shows how these factors, they're progressive.
So you start with a solid base, and each step kind of builds on the last one.
Exactly. Mindfulness is where it all begins. It's the foundation of awareness, right?
Yeah.
Then you got discernment. That's the ability to see what's helpful, what's not helpful for your mind.
So you're not just aware, you're starting to like analyze and actually make choices.
Precisely. And that leads to persistence, the energy to really cultivate the good stuff, let go of the bad. And get this is where it gets really interesting. That effort, it fuels the next 4 factors: rapture, serenity, concentration, and equanimity.
Okay, gotta admit, equanimity, it's one of those words I hear a lot, but not always sure I totally get it.
Think of it like this, that unshakable inner peace. You know, it comes when we learn to stop clinging to the good stuff and resisting the bad stuff. Really powerful state of mental balance.
So it's not being blah or, you know, indifferent. It's more like this deep, stable center can weather any storm, right?
Yeah, exactly. But now you might be thinking, hold on, this sounds super advanced.
Yeah, like are these only for, I don't know, people on a mountaintop meditating toward enlightenment?
Right. Like, is it even relevant to daily life?
Exactly.
Yeah.
Emails to answer, deadlines, you know, the usual chaos.
Great point. And actually, the source addresses that directly. It says these 7 factors, they're not just for those seeking, you know, full-on enlightenment. They're tools for right now, for everyday concentration, well-being.
So even if I'm not, say, aiming for complete liberation from suffering, right now, these factors can help me focus better, get less distracted by, well, everything.
Precisely. It even says how the factors help us starve the bad mental habits. They call them hindrances, while feeding the positive ones.
Feeding and starving. Can you give me like a real-life example of that?
Let's say you're wrestling with uncertainty. Happens to everyone, right? That's a hindrance. But if you start analyzing your thoughts, like skillfully breaking them down, seeing if they're helpful or not, that's discernment, one of the factors. Helps you overcome that uncertain feeling, starving it by feeding its opposite, clear understanding.
So it's like shining a light on those doubtful thoughts. See if they, I don't know, hold up under scrutiny.
Exactly. And the more we do that, the stronger those positive mental factors get, leading to greater clarity and stability mentally.
Makes sense. Now, that holographic idea you mentioned, how's it all interconnected?
Well, the source says these factors are, quote, holographically present, unquote, in mindfulness practice. So every part reflects the whole.
So even starting out, all 7 factors are somehow there, just waiting to be developed.
Good way to think about it. The spiral view, it shows how they build on each other over time, right? Holographic view shows how they all support each other right now in each moment.
So process Engi state of being, kind of.
Yeah.
Building skills, but also working with all the elements at once. You know, what really fascinates me is this appropriate attention idea. The source really emphasizes that as like key to the 7 factors.
It is key. It's like, imagine a mental spotlight, right? Where you shine it, what you focus on, that's what makes all the difference. And this isn't just for meditation. It's like for how we approach everything.
So choosing where we put our energy instead of getting swept away by, you know, every distraction or worry.
Exactly. And the text, it actually gives a method for developing that appropriate attention. First, you got to accurately label the hindrances and factors as they come up, like become a detective of your own mind.
So instead of just feeling stressed, I go, okay, anxiety's showing up right now.
Yes. Then investigate. What causes them? What makes them stronger, weaker? Finally, look at the questions you're asking yourself. Are they helping you get clarity or just adding to the mental noise?
Good point. Sometimes those questions, they just keep us stuck in a loop, don't they?
Appropriate attention is about learning to ask the questions that lead to more insight, more clarity, and ultimately more freedom.
All this makes sense, but how do you know if you're doing it right? Any particular technique?
Oh, there's tons of techniques for these factors. But the source gives some key insights. Remember that balance we talked about. Crucial here, too. You use different factors to counteract specific hindrances. Let's say you're restless.
Can't settle the mind yet. Know that feeling all too well.
Text suggests cultivating serenity and concentration to calm that scattered energy.
So those calming factors, they're like an antidote to the restlessness. But how do I know if my efforts are, like, going anywhere? Is there a measurement?
There is a standard of measurement, the source says. Ideally, each factor is developed in a way that leads to seclusion, dispassion, cessation, and a sense of letting go.
Okay, now we're getting into some deep stuff. Seclusion, dispassion, that sounds pretty intense. Talking about becoming a hermit, giving up all pleasures.
Not necessarily. Remember, these terms, they have practical meanings and also, more transcendent ones. Seclusion practically could just be creating space to practice, finding a quiet corner at home, disconnecting from technology. Dispassion, it's about loosening that grip of craving and aversion,
So not becoming indifferent to everything, but finding that balance where you're not constantly reacting to every little thing.
Exactly. And cessation, it points towards that temporary stilling of the mind you get in deep meditation, but it's not forcing your mind blank. It's more about letting thoughts come and go, not getting swept away.
Okay, makes more sense. What about letting go? What's that mean here?
It's releasing attachment to thoughts, emotions, stuff, even ideas about ourselves.
That's a tall order. But I can see how it would be, like, incredibly freeing to not be so attached to everything.
Absolutely. And these qualities, seclusion, dispassion, cessation, letting go, they're not separate goals, but kind of aspects of the path itself.
Right.
As you cultivate the 7 factors, they emerge naturally.
Like they're woven together, supporting each other. There's one thing about all this Buddha stuff that always throws me off. Not self. Feels a bit nihilistic, like, if there's no self, what's the point?
Common misunderstanding. Interestingly, this source, it doesn't tell you to obsess over whether a self exists or not. It says, shift the focus to how this idea can help, practically, to alleviate suffering.
Less abstract philosophy, more practical application. I like that. But how do you apply not self in real life?
Instead of asking, do I exist, which can lead to endless debate, try this. Is this mine? Is this me?
Trying to wrap my head around that. What kind of this are we talking?
Anything.
Yeah.
Thoughts, feelings, sensations, possessions, situations, anything. Is this mine? Is this me? Helps you look at attachment, clinging.
So if I'm, like, anxious about a work deadline and I ask, is this anxiety mine? Is this me? Then what?
You might realize that anxiety, it's not inherently you. It's happening in your awareness, but doesn't define who you are deep down. The text goes even further. It says, ask, if I see these things as me or mine, will there be suffering?
So clinging to that anxiety like it's part of me just creates more suffering.
And here's the tie-in to letting go.
Yeah.
By identifying with less, seeing that these experiences aren't inherently you, you get freedom, clarity.
It's about changing your relationship to those experiences, not pretending they don't exist.
Precisely. This is not self-idea. It's not nihilism. It's about seeing how fluid, how impermanent experience is, and that leads to peace, liberation.
Helpful way to think about it, like decluttering the mind, letting go of all that baggage we tend to carry around.
Perfect analogy. This letting go, it's not a one-time thing. It's ongoing. The 7 factors, they're the roadmap for that journey.
Seems like these factors, they're less a concept and more a guide to living with, I don't know, more clarity, peace, even in all the daily chaos.
That's it. It's about making these principles part of how we live, part of our daily awareness.
So we've got the spiral staircase, the interconnectedness, even not self. What else is there?
Well, we could look at how these factors show up in meditation practice, specifically the 4 frames of reference.
Hold on, before we jump into that, let's take a moment to recap what we've covered. Just, let it all sink in a bit.
Excellent idea.
Okay.
Sometimes the most important part of any journey is pausing to appreciate the view.
Okay, I think we've had a moment to process all that. You were about to take us into meditation and the 4 frames of reference, right?
Yeah, the source, it points out how the 7 factors, they naturally come up when you're doing this particular meditation practice.
Okay, for anyone needing a refresher, what are the 4 frames of reference again?
They're the 4 basic areas of awareness in Buddhist meditation: body, feelings, mind, and mental qualities. Developing clear and present awareness of what's going on in each one.
Right, like shining that spotlight we talked about onto different parts of our experience. So how do the 7 factors fit into that?
Well, the text says, by focusing on any of those frames, you're naturally engaging all 7 factors.
So it's all one system, kind of.
Exactly, like package deal. Let's say you're doing mindfulness of the breath. That's the body, right?
So just sitting, paying attention to the breath going in, out.
Right. And doing that, paying attention, that's mindfulness, the first factor, already happening. Then you might notice your mind wandering, thinking about, I don't know, emails, dinner, whatever.
Oh, yeah. My mind's an expert wanderer for sure.
That's where discernment comes in, the second factor.
Yeah.
You see that distraction, it's a hindrance, pulling you away from what you're focusing on.
So aware of breath, get distracted, use discernment to label it. Then what?
Then gently, you bring your attention back to the breath. That's persistence, third factor, in action.
Not about beating myself up for getting distracted, just gently guiding the mind back.
And as you do this, you might even feel these little moments of joy, peace as you settle into the breath. That's rapture, fourth factor, starting to come up.
So it's not forced, it just kind of appears as you practice.
Exactly. And that peace, it deepens into serenity, fifth factor, as your mind gets more concentrated.
Seeing how they all build on each other, it's pretty dynamic. But what about concentration itself?
As your attention gets steady, less distracted, that's when you enter concentration, the sixth factor. Deep meditation, this can lead to deep absorption, the mind super still, focused.
This is painting a pretty vivid picture. What about equanimity, the last one?
Equanimity, it comes naturally as you get less reactive to all the ups and downs in your experience. Thoughts, sensations, emotions, they come and go, but they don't shake your inner peace anymore.
You've got space around your experience, not so caught up in the drama of it all.
Exactly. And what's really cool is this isn't just for meditation. You can apply it to anything.
Not just sitting on a cushion, but bringing these qualities to everything we do.
Exactly. Imagine you're stressed about a presentation at work.
Oh, don't have to imagine. Got one next week.
Well, instead of getting overwhelmed, you start by bringing mindfulness to it. Feel the stress in your body, the thoughts, no judgment.
So not pushing the stress away, just noticing it's there?
Right. Then discernment. Are there things you can do about this stress?
Maybe I haven't prepared enough, or I'm trying to do too much, need to delegate.
Exactly. And once you've got those action steps, persistence kicks in.
Yeah.
You commit to doing what you can.
And as I'm working through it skillfully, those feelings of peace, equanimity might start coming up, the 7 factors, or I don't know, supporting me through it.
That's the idea. They're practical tools for dealing with life's ups and downs, with more wisdom, more resilience.
Okay, starting to see how connected it all is. We've got the staircase, the holographic image, the tools.
And now, how they work within this specific meditation, the four frames.
But one thing I'm still wondering, we talk about cultivating these factors, but does that ever end? Like, is there a point where, I don't know, you've mastered them all, you're done?
Ooh, good question. That goes deeper than just the techniques. It gets to the heart of this whole path.
You said it gets to what awakening really means. So is there a final destination? You master all seven, you're like, done.
Well, the source, it has a very interesting take on this. It says true awakening, it's not a fixed endpoint. It's more of an ongoing process.
So not like reaching the top of the stairs, okay, I'm here.
Not exactly. Think of it more like a dance, this constant interplay of the factors with, your experience, which is always changing.
Interesting image. So even if you've been practicing for years, you've got deep insight, there's still more to discover.
The journey of awakening, it's about constantly deepening your understanding, refining your awareness, freeing yourself from those patterns that hold you back.
Makes sense. It's not about achieving some perfect state. It's about this dynamic process of growth transformation.
Exactly. And that process, it's fueled by the seven factors. They're the guides, the support, the catalysts along the way.
So even someone like deeply awakened, they're still engaging with these factors.
In a way, yeah. Maybe not consciously striving to cultivate them the same way as someone just starting out.
More like they've become so, I don't know, integrated. They just happen naturally, like breathing.
Beautiful analogy. The source even says, for a truly awakened being, these factors aren't separate things. They're just different aspects of one awareness.
Not compartmentalizing, mindfulness here, discernment there, but realizing it's all woven together.
That's it. And as you go on this path, you start experiencing that connection more and more.
This is really changing how I think about awakening. It's not a far-off goal. It's about embodying these qualities right now.
That's the power of the seven factors. Not just concepts, but living principles that can change how we experience everything, how we interact with the world.
This has been incredibly rich. I feel like I'm not just understanding these seven factors intellectually, but like starting to feel how they can actually shape my life.
It's been wonderful sharing this with you. And remember, this is just the start of your exploration.
For sure. And for our listeners wanting to go deeper, we highly recommend checking out the source we've been using, The Seven Factors for Awakening, on dhammatalks.org.
It's packed with wisdom, can really guide you as you cultivate these qualities in yourself.
And on that note, we come to the end of our deep dive. Hope you found it as insightful as we have. Until next time, keep those mental spotlights bright and keep exploring the amazing potential of the seven factors of awakening. Okay, we're back and ready to pick up where we left off. That whole idea of an end point when you're cultivating these seven factors, remember?
Right. That question, it goes beyond just techniques, Gets to the core of the path itself.
You said it gets to what awakening really means. So is there like a final destination? You master all seven, boom, you're done.
Well, this source, it has a really nuanced view on that. It says, true awakening, it's not a fixed point, more like an ongoing unfolding.
So it's not like climbing to the top of the mountain and woo, made it.
Not quite. Think of it, maybe more like a dance. This constant back and forth between the factors within your experience, which is always changing, of course.
Okay, I like that image. So even if someone's been practicing forever, they've got deep insight, there's still more to discover.
Always. The journey of awakening, it's about continually going deeper, refining your awareness, and, freeing yourself from those patterns that hold you back.
So not about reaching some perfect state, but more of a dynamic thing, growth, transformation.
Exactly. And that process, it's fueled by the seven factors. They're the guides, the support, the catalysts along the way.
Even someone who's, I don't know, super awakened, they're still working with these factors.
In a way, yes. Might not be consciously trying to cultivate them the same way as someone just starting, though.
More like they've become so ingrained, so natural, it's just like how they operate now.
Beautiful way to put it. The source even suggests, for a truly awakened being, those factors aren't separate things anymore. They're all just facets of this unified awareness.
Not mindfulness over here, discernment over there, but seeing it's all woven together.
Exactly. And the further you go on this path, the more you experience that interconnectedness.
Wow, this is really shifting how I think about awakening. It's not some far-off goal. It's about living these qualities right now, in each moment.
That's the power, the real power, of the seven factors. They're not just concepts. They're living principles. Can change how we see everything, how we interact with the world.
This has been incredible, really. I feel like I'm not just, understanding these seven factors in my head, but actually starting to feel how they can shape how I live.
Wonderful to hear. And remember, this is just the beginning. Your own exploration is just starting.
Absolutely. And for everyone listening, if you want to dive deeper, check out the source we've been talking about, The 7 Factors for Awakening, on dhammatalks.org.
Tons of wisdom in there can guide you as you work on these qualities within yourself.
And on that note, we've reached the end of our deep dive today. Hope you found it as insightful as we did. Until next time, keep those mental spotlights shining bright. Keep exploring the amazing potential of these 7 factors of awakening. Welcome back, everybody, for another deep dive into some really fascinating Buddhist thought. Today, we're going to be looking at, let me start over. You sent me some excerpts from The 5 Faculties. It's from Wings to Awakening on dhammatalks.org. And I thought it would be really interesting, because we've talked about this before, to kind of dig into what these faculties are all about. So we've got conviction, persistence, mindfulness, concentration, and discernment. And how all of these actually work together as like a roadmap for achieving awakening. Kind of like, I don't know if you've ever thought about it like this, but have you ever felt like you have that strong inner compass that's kind of guiding you towards a certain goal? Well, the 5 faculties are kind of like that compass. But in this case, they're guiding us or pointing us towards liberation from suffering.
And the really cool thing is that this roadmap, it's not just some kind of abstract philosophy. It's actually rooted in practical steps that you can take. And each faculty builds upon the last one to create this powerful cycle of growth.
Yeah, that's really what caught my eye, too, this idea that they all work together, almost like a feedback loop. But before we get into that, in the source material, the word indriya is used for faculty. And right away I was thinking, okay, what's the deeper meaning here?
Yeah, that's a great question. It actually takes us all the way back to the ancient Vedic traditions. So Indriya is linked to Indra, who is a very powerful god, who embodies this sense of dominance or control. So when we're talking about faculties in Buddhism, what we're really talking about are these mental factors that need to become dominant in our minds in order for awakening to even occur. It's like they're taking the reins and they're guiding our thoughts and actions towards that ultimate goal of liberation.
So it's not just about understanding these concepts intellectually, but about actually cultivating them to the point where they actually become like driving forces within us.
Exactly. And that's where the interconnectedness of the 5 faculties really comes into play. Each one is supporting and strengthening the others. So it creates this upward spiral of development. So why don't we start with conviction, which, to a lot of people, it might sound a little bit like blind faith, but it's actually much more nuanced than that.
Yeah, when I hear the word conviction, my Western mind goes to like religious faith, which isn't quite the same thing.
Yeah, and you're right to point that out. So conviction in the Buddha sense has 3 interconnected dimensions. You have trust, belief, and action. Yes. So trust refers to faith in the wisdom of enlightened beings like the Buddha and their teachings. And belief is accepting the core principles of Buddhism, like karma and rebirth.
Yeah.
But it doesn't stop there. You have the third element, which is action, which is really critical because you need to actually put these teachings into practice in your daily life if you want to move towards liberation.
So it's not just a passive acceptance, but an active engagement with these teachings. It's like saying, I believe that this is true, and now I'm going to go out and live my life in a way that actually reflects that belief.
Exactly. And it kind of brings us to this really powerful analogy from passage section 73, which compares conviction to the main post in a royal fortress. So you can kind of imagine that, this very strong, solid foundation that provides stability and protection, but that strength comes from its deep roots and that firm placement.
Yeah, that's such a vivid image. And it makes me think that without that solid foundation of conviction, everything else would just crumble. And it seems like that foundation naturally leads us to the next faculty, which is persistence.
Absolutely. Think of persistence as that energy. That's fueling our journey towards awakening. It's that unwavering commitment to keep practicing, to keep refining your understanding, even when things get tough.
Yeah, I can relate to that whenever I'm learning something new, whether it's like trying to play a musical instrument or I'm trying to master a new recipe. It's that persistence that gets me through the frustrating parts.
Exactly. And just like in those examples, persistence in the Buddhist context translates to right exertion on the Eightfold Path. So it's about consistently putting in the effort to cultivate those wholesome qualities and to let go of the unskillful ones. There's a great analogy in passage section 86. It compares persistence in meditation to tuning a musical instrument. So you don't want the strings to be too tight. You don't want them to be too loose. You need to find that perfect balance.
Okay. I love that analogy. It really speaks to this idea of finding that sweet spot where effort meets ease. And it seems like we're already starting to see how these faculties build on each other, with conviction leading to persistence. But where do mindfulness and concentration fit into this whole picture?
Well, imagine you're trying to tune that instrument, but you're in a really noisy room. It's going to be pretty hard to hear those subtle changes in the pitch, right?
So mindfulness is kind of like creating that inner quiet so we can actually like hear the music, so to speak.
Exactly. Mindfulness in the Buddhist sense is the ability to be present, to be aware, to observe your thoughts, your feelings, sensations, without judgment, without getting carried away by them. And you're right, it does create that inner stillness that we need to refine our understanding and to really make progress on the path.
And that inner stillness seems like the perfect breeding ground for concentration.
Absolutely. You can think of mindfulness as that foundation for deeper concentration. As we become more mindful, we develop the ability to focus our attention more sharply, and that leads to these increasingly profound states of meditative absorption, which are known as the jhanas.
Okay, now the jhanas are something I've heard about, but don't fully understand. They seem kind of mysterious and maybe even a little intimidating. But what's their purpose in this whole scheme of things?
Yeah, the jhanas are all about cultivating mental stability and clarity. Think of them as like mental training grounds, where you develop incredible focus and resilience. And while they might seem a little esoteric, their purpose is actually very practical. So passage section 72 explains that the jhanas provide the mental stability that we need to develop true discernment, which is the next faculty on our list. You see, when your mind is constantly bombarded by distractions, by reactive emotions, it's hard to see things clearly. The jhanas help you to cut through that mental clutter and perceive reality with more accuracy.
So it's like the jhanas are like a mental gym where we're building up those mental muscles that we need for true insight.
That's a great way to put it. It's not just about achieving those blissful states of meditation, but about training the mind to be more stable, more focused, more resilient. And that then allows us to develop that crucial faculty of discernment.
Okay, now I'm really intrigued by this discernment piece. It seems like the culmination of all these other faculties we've been talking about. But what exactly is it? And why is it so crucial for achieving awakening?
Discernment is that ability to see reality as it truly is, without those distortions of our usual perceptions. It's like finally putting on the right pair of glasses and seeing the world in high definition. And what's fascinating is that discernment takes us from a kind of preliminary understanding of the Four Noble Truths to a truly transformative, visceral level of insight.
So it's not just knowing the Four Noble Truths intellectually, but actually experiencing their truth on a deeper level.
Exactly. Discernment allows you to not just understand that suffering exists, but to really see the causes of suffering in your own life and in the world around you. And when you see those causes clearly, that's when real transformation can happen.
That makes sense. But, as we're talking about discernment, something you mentioned earlier is kind of bouncing around in my head. You said that true mastery of the faculties involves escaping from them. That seems a bit paradoxical, doesn't it? I mean, if these faculties are so important for awakening, why would we want to escape from them?
It's a great question. And it points to this subtle but really crucial understanding in Buddhism. While these faculties are essential tools for achieving awakening, they're just that. They're tools, and we can't become attached to them.
So it's like using a ladder to climb onto a roof. But once you're up there, you don't need to keep carrying the ladder around with you, right?
Perfect analogy. Passage section 88 emphasizes that even skillful qualities, like concentration and discernment, can become hindrances if we cling to them too tightly. True awakening involves transcending even the tools that helped us get there.
So how do we escape these faculties if they're so deeply ingrained in the path to awakening?
It's not about abandoning the faculties altogether, but about recognizing their true nature. Think of it like this. You use a boat to cross a river, but once you reach the other shore, you don't carry the boat on your back, do you?
No, that'd be pretty silly.
Exactly. And in the same way, we use the 5 faculties to navigate the river of suffering. But once we reach the shore of liberation, we don't need to cling to those faculties anymore.
I think I'm starting to grasp this. But do you have like a concrete example of what this escape might look like in practice?
Okay, so imagine someone who has become incredibly skilled at discerning the truth, spotting falsehoods, understanding complex situations. They might even start to identify with that skill, thinking to themselves, I am a discerning person. But that very identification, that clinging to the faculty of discernment, can actually become a subtle obstacle. It's like the discerning mind becomes just another filter, another layer of conditioning.
Ah, I see. So it's not the faculty itself that's the problem, but
Yeah.
our attachment to it, our identification with it becomes part of our ego in a way.
Exactly. There's a passage in DN1 that describes this beautifully. It says that an awakened person doesn't even hold on to the act of discernment itself. They achieve this state of knowing but not holding. It's like they've completely let go.
Yeah.
Any attachment to that process of understanding. And in that letting go, they experience true liberation.
Wow, that's a really profound thought. It's like they're not even attached to being right or knowing. They're just present with what is, without grasping.
Exactly. And that brings us back to the interconnectedness of the 5 faculties.
Yeah.
Not just a linear progression. It's more like this continuous cycle. As we cultivate discernment, it actually strengthens our conviction, which leads to a deeper practice, which further develops all of the faculties, ultimately bringing us closer to liberation. It's this beautiful self-reinforcing system that really propels us forward on the path.
So it's like each faculty is like a spoke on a wheel. And as the wheel turns, each spoke supports the others. And it creates this momentum that moves us towards awakening.
That's a fantastic analogy. It really captures the dynamic and interdependent nature of the 5 faculties. And I think that's one of the most empowering aspects of this whole teaching. It shows us that the path to awakening isn't some distant, unattainable goal. It's something that we can actively cultivate through dedicated practice. And by nurturing these qualities within ourselves.
It makes me think of that passage, section 81, that asks, if heedfulness is the path to the deathless and heedlessness the path to death, how can you cultivate more heedfulness in your own life?
What a powerful question for all of us to consider. It's like a direct invitation to become more aware, more present, more engaged in each moment.
And the beauty of that question is it brings this whole teaching back to our everyday experience. How can we bring more mindfulness into our daily routines, our interactions, our choices? Maybe it's starting a daily meditation practice, even if it's just for a few minutes. Or maybe it's just making a conscious effort to be more present during conversations, really listening to what other people have to say.
It's almost like those small acts of awareness, those moments of presence, are like these tiny sparks that ignite this whole cycle of the 5 faculties.
Exactly. And as those sparks ignite, they fuel our conviction, our persistence, our mindfulness, our concentration, our discernment, leading us ever closer to that ultimate goal of liberation. Well, this has been such an insightful and inspiring deep dive. It feels like we've only just scratched the surface of this really rich and profound teaching, but it's given me a much clearer understanding of how the 5 faculties can actually work together to guide us on this path.
I'm so glad to hear that. And remember, this is just the beginning. There's a whole world of wisdom waiting to be discovered within the Wings to Awakening and other Buddhist texts. So I encourage you to keep exploring, keep practicing, and keep cultivating these incredible qualities within yourself.
Well, thank you so much for guiding us through this exploration. And for everyone listening out there, I hope this deep dive has inspired you to kind of embark on your own journey of discovery. And remember, the path to awakening is available to anyone willing to cultivate these inner qualities and walk the path with dedication. Until next time, keep diving deep. Welcome back, everyone. Ready for another deep dive?
Always.
Great. So today we're taking a look at something pretty interesting.
Okay.
It's called 𝙀𝙀 from Buddhist philosophy. And we'll be drawing on your sources, of course.
Sounds good.
So 𝙀𝙀, it's often translated as power, but we're going to be focusing specifically on something called the 4 bases of power.
Right.
And here's the twist. 𝙀𝙀 can apply to any skill or pursuit, really.
Absolutely.
Not just meditation.
That's one of the things that really fascinates me about 𝙀𝙀.
Yeah.
How it's not just about, those fantastical supernatural powers.
Right.
But it's much more nuanced than that, encompassing success, accomplishment, even just general prowess in anything.
Yeah, it's funny. You wouldn't typically think prowess
Right.
when you hear the word power, would you?
Not usually, no.
Yeah, it's interesting. So our sources actually break down 𝙀𝙀 into 6 different forms.
Right.
But here's the thing. Only one is considered truly transcendent. And that's the power to overcome mental disturbances, those mental roadblocks to peace and clarity.
Yes, and I think that's a really important point that sometimes gets missed.
Yeah.
These other 5 forms of 𝙀𝙀, while they're certainly interesting, are kind of considered like side effects almost.
Oh, interesting.
So things like levitation, clairvoyance, even remembering past lives.
Wow.
All part of 𝙀𝙀, but not the ultimate goal.
So it's like even if you could like walk through walls, Buddhism is saying there's something even more powerful.
Precisely.
That's pretty wild.
Yeah, it's a perspective you don't hear every day.
Definitely not. The sources even mention these enlightened beings called arahants who actually had these powers but were discouraged from showing them off.
It was seen as almost a distraction
From
the real work.
Yeah, because what's the point, right? If true power comes from that inner transformation.
Exactly.
Not the flashy tricks.
It's not about the show. It's about the substance.
Right, exactly. Makes me think of that saying, actions speak louder than words.
Absolutely.
It's not about what you can do. It's about the real impact that you have on yourself and the world around you.
I love that.
So, okay, let's get back to those 4 bases of power.
But,
desire, persistence, intent, and discrimination.
Right.
And those sound like, I mean, on the surface, they sound like the foundation for
they do, yes.
any kind of success, right?
Yeah.
So how do they actually work?
Well, the sources explain that these bases are pathways to cultivate ED. And they all involve this focused concentration and what's called right exertion.
Right exertion.
Which is a kind of mindful effort, not just brute force.
So it's not just about like wanting something badly enough or powering through no matter what.
Not at all.
It's about applying those qualities in a skillful, like a focused way.
Yes, precisely.
And is that kind of what the sources are getting at when they say a monk develops the base of power endowed with concentration founded on, and then in brackets they have desire, persistent discrimination, and the fabrications of exertion.
Yes.
What does that even mean? I mean, it seems like there's more to it than just wishing for something.
Oh, definitely.
It's not like, you know, The Secret or something.
Not quite, no.
Okay.
It's more about how these qualities become the lens, you could say, through which you focus your concentration and your energy. And actually, each of these bases involves 3 specific qualities.
Okay, lay it on me.
Ardency, that's the right exertion part.
Right.
Alertness and mindfulness.
Okay, so wait, urgency, alertness, and mindfulness.
Yes.
That sounds kind of familiar.
Does it?
That sounds a lot like the first stage.
It does, doesn't it?
A frame of reference meditation in Buddhism.
You're exactly right.
Where you're really like honing in on that focused awareness.
You're spot on. And here's what's interesting. These 4 bases, especially the desire and effort parts, sometimes get criticized.
Oh, really?
Especially from a Western perspective.
Interesting.
For being counterproductive to meditation.
Oh, I can see that.
People think, wait, aren't you supposed to let go of desire?
Right, exactly.
And reach this kind of peaceful state?
Yeah, if you're trying to quiet your mind, wouldn't all that desire and effort just add more noise?
That's the common misconception.
Okay.
The sources clarify that it's not the qualities themselves that are the problem.
Oh.
It's how they're applied.
I see.
Just like, you know, fire can warm you.
Or burn you.
Exactly. It all depends on how you use it.
Right.
Desire, effort, intent, discrimination, when used skillfully, they actually help you focus on the present moment.
Okay.
And as we know, that is key to mastering anything.
So it's like, instead of trying to eliminate these qualities, you're learning to like refine them.
Exactly.
And use them to your advantage.
Yeah. Precisely. Think of desire not as this craving for the end result, but as this deep passion for understanding the process.
Okay.
And discrimination isn't about being judgmental.
Right.
It's about seeing clearly the path ahead.
Okay.
And making wise choices.
So I get that, but I think a lot of people listening might be thinking, how do we connect this to, say, learning a language or starting a business?
Yeah, that's a good point.
I mean, it still feels a bit abstract, you know?
I hear you.
How do you take these philosophical concepts and actually apply them to those real-world goals?
Right, right. You know, the sources actually offer a helpful analogy here.
Okay.
To illustrate this.
Okay.
Imagine a musician learning like a complex piece of music.
Okay.
They need that burning desire to master it.
Right.
The persistence to practice day after day.
Yeah.
The clear intent to interpret the music with their own unique voice. And the sharp discrimination to identify the areas that need improvement.
Right, right.
So it's not just about hitting the right notes.
Yeah.
It's about weaving them together
Right.
into this beautiful and meaningful whole.
Yeah, that's a much clearer image, I think,
Right.
than the Grand Canyon one. I like that one better.
I think it really highlights how
Yeah.
you need all these elements working in harmony
Mm-hmm.
to really create something special.
Yeah, and this idea of skillful application.
Yeah.
And it seems to be like a recurring theme here.
It is, isn't it?
So how do you actually cultivate that balance then between like desire and letting go?
That's where these deeper levels of the bases of power really come into play.
Okay.
The sources talk about refining these qualities to a point where you can perceive what is in front and behind, so that what is in front is the same as what is behind. What is below is the same as what is above. Night is the same as day.
Whoa, okay, hold on. That sounds pretty out there.
It is a bit mind-bending, yes.
How can what's in front be the same as what's behind? Like, that seems almost paradoxical.
It is. It points to a level of awareness, though, that transcends our usual limitations, time and space.
So it's like you're developing this expansive awareness.
Exactly.
Where those, like, dualities start to dissolve.
Precisely.
So by mastering these bases, you're not just achieving a specific goal.
Right.
You're actually, like, transforming your perception of reality.
Exactly. But here's what's really fascinating. Even after achieving this level of awareness, the Buddha urged his followers to go even further by developing extreme sensitivity.
Oh, wow.
Even the subtlest mental defilements.
Wait, so there's more?
There's always more.
I thought mastering space and time was like the ultimate achievement.
It's a pretty high bar, yeah.
What could possibly be beyond that?
Well, it's about recognizing that even in this highly concentrated mind, these tiny choices of greed, aversion, and delusion
can still linger. So even when you think you've reached peak performance, there's still another layer to peel back.
It's a continuous process.
Yes, it's a never-ending quest for self-improvement.
In a way, yes.
Okay.
The path to true mastery is this continuous process of refinement and self-awareness.
Okay.
And this brings us to another key concept, the deathless.
The deathless.
A state of liberation
that
goes beyond our usual understanding of life and death.
Okay, now we're really getting into, like,
I know, right?
The deep end of the pool here.
Yeah.
I'm intrigued, but also a bit intimidated.
Yeah, it's a big topic.
So what exactly is the deathless?
Right.
And how does it relate to these 4 bases of power?
Well, the sources suggest that the final stage of mastering these bases
Okay.
involves this radical shift in perspective.
Okay.
It's not enough to simply refine your desire, persistence, intent, and discrimination.
Oh, there's more.
You have to let go of even the idea that you are the master of these powers.
Wait, what? So after all that work?
I know, it's a bit of a paradox.
You're saying the ultimate goal is to, like, surrender control.
Yeah, in a way, yes.
That seems kind of counterintuitive.
It does, doesn't it?
Wouldn't that lead to, like, complacency?
You'd think so?
Or even stagnate?
It's a common concern.
Yeah.
But think about it this way.
Okay.
If you're clinging to the idea of being the master of your abilities, isn't there still this subtle sense of ego involved?
I see what you mean.
You're still identifying with the doer, the achiever.
It's like that saying, the ego is a terrible master.
Exactly.
But if you let go of that sense of mastery, wouldn't you lose, like, motivation?
That's the question, isn't it?
How do you balance that surrender with the desire to, like, achieve anything worthwhile?
That's a great question, and I think the sources address this.
Okay.
By using this phrase, incline the mind to the deathless.
Okay, incline the mind to the deathless.
And this doesn't mean trying to become immortal.
Right.
It's about shifting your focus from this impermanent, ever-changing realm of experience to a deeper, unchanging reality.
So it's about transcending those limitations, then, that we usually place on ourselves.
Exactly.
The limitations of time and space, even the limitations of our own ego.
Precisely. The deathless is often associated with nibbana, which is the ultimate goal in Buddhism.
Right.
This state of perfect peace and liberation from suffering. Where you're no longer bound by those limitations.
But how do the 4 bases of power lead to this state?
Right, that's the key question.
It still feels like a pretty big leap.
It does, yeah.
It's one thing to refine those qualities for, like, practical achievements.
Yeah.
But how do they connect to this
Right.
deeper level of
Yeah.
spiritual liberation.
Exactly.
How do you bridge that gap? I don't know. It seems like we're talking about
Yeah.
two different kinds of mastery.
It's like mastery in the world and then mastery over, like
Yeah.
the mind itself.
Right. And that's actually,
Could those two be connected?
that's the beauty of the four bases.
Oh, okay.
They bridge that gap.
Okay.
As you refine these qualities, you're not just becoming more skillful.
Right.
You're also training your mind to be incredibly focused and present.
So it's like peeling away
Yes.
layers of mental clutter,
Exactly.
allowing for this deeper, more direct experience
Yes.
of reality.
So the more you refine these bases,
Okay.
the more you're able to see through those illusions.
The illusions that keep us trapped
Exactly.
in suffering.
That's how you incline your mind to the deathless.
Oh, okay.
It's not about forcing your way into that state,
Right.
but cultivating the conditions
That make it possible.
Exactly. And one of the key practices the sources emphasize
Yeah.
is simply observing what's present
Okay.
without adding anything to it. So just observing.
Does that ring a bell?
It sounds a lot like mindfulness
It does, doesn't it?
that we've talked about before.
Yeah.
You know, just noticing your thoughts and feelings
Right.
without judgment.
Exactly.
But how does just observing things lead to such a profound shift?
Well, it's about recognizing the impermanent,
Okay.
interconnected nature of all things.
Okay.
And this aligns with that third stage of frame of reference meditation in Buddhism,
Okay.
which focuses on emptiness.
Emptiness.
And emptiness doesn't mean that nothing exists.
Right. Right.
It's about seeing through that illusion
Okay.
of a separate, independent self.
Okay.
And understanding that everything is interconnected and constantly changing.
So by cultivating those four bases and this understanding of emptiness,
Yes.
you're essentially paving the way then
You got it.
for liberation.
Yeah. It's like those qualities become tools for dismantling the very structures that create suffering.
Okay. That's a great way to put it. But how does letting go of that idea of mastery actually translate into real-world success?
Good question.
It seems like you still need that sense of agency
You do, yes.
to achieve anything worthwhile.
Absolutely.
So how do you balance that surrender with that ambition?
It's a delicate dance.
Okay.
And that's where this paradoxical nature of the bases really shines through.
Okay.
On one hand, you're cultivating them to a point of mastery.
Right.
Becoming incredibly skillful and effective.
But on the other hand, you're letting go.
You're learning to detach from the idea that you are the one in control.
So it's about becoming so skilled
Yes.
that your actions just flow effortlessly.
Exactly.
Like you're being guided by something beyond your conscious control.
Like a martial artist who reacts instinctively.
Oh, interesting.
Without thinking.
Okay.
Effortlessly deflecting blows. Or a dancer whose movements have become so fluid that they seem to be guided by the music itself.
Now, that's a kind of mastery I can get behind.
Yeah.
But how do we actually cultivate this?
Well, the first step is self-awareness.
Self-awareness, okay.
Paying attention to your thoughts, feelings, and actions. And noticing how those four bases are playing out in your life.
So if you're constantly chasing external validation, that might be a sign.
That could be a sign.
That your desire is out of balance.
Exactly.
Or if you're pushing yourself relentlessly without listening to your body's needs, that could be excessive persistence.
That's a good example.
So it's about taking an honest look in the mirror and seeing how these qualities are shaping our experiences.
But once you see those patterns,
what do you do?
It's about becoming more conscious of your choices. Recognizing that you have the power.
We do.
To refine those qualities. And direct them in a way that aligns with your values.
So it's not about eliminating them altogether.
No.
It's about becoming like...
Yes.
The conductor.
The conductor, I love that.
Of your own mental orchestra.
Yeah.
Right. Guiding those powerful forces in a direction that leads to both. Like inner peace and outer effectiveness.
That's a great analogy.
Thanks.
And remember, this is a lifelong journey.
Right.
Not a destination.
Not a destination, yeah.
You'll inevitably encounter challenges.
For sure.
Setbacks.
Yeah, I can relate to that.
It's like learning to ride a bike.
Right.
You're going to fall a few times.
You're going to fall,
before you find your balance.
But each time you fall,
exactly,
you learn something.
You get a little bit closer to mastering the skill.
Mastering it, yeah.
The key is to approach those challenges with curiosity and compassion
Okay.
rather than judgment
Right.
or self-criticism.
That's important.
And remember, you don't have to go it alone.
Oh, good point.
The sources emphasize seeking guidance
Okay.
from teachers or mentors.
Yeah, we all need a little help from our friends sometimes.
Right. Especially when venturing into uncharted territory.
Absolutely.
And as you continue to refine those bases,
Okay.
you might be surprised
Yeah.
by the shifts you experience.
In our lives.
You may find yourself more resilient
Okay.
in the face of adversity,
Okay.
more focused and productive
Mm-hmm.
in your work,
Okay.
more compassionate and understanding
Wow.
in your relationships.
Those are some pretty amazing side effects.
They are, aren't they?
It sounds like these 4 bases are not just about achieving worldly success,
It's much more than that.
but becoming like a better,
Yes.
more whole
Yes.
human being.
And that's what this deep dive has been all about.
That's what it's all about, yeah.
It's not just about accumulating knowledge.
Right.
It's about using that knowledge
Right.
to transform yourself
Yes.
and the world around you.
Well, I think that about wraps up
I think so.
our exploration of the 4 bases of power.
Yeah, it's been a fascinating journey.
It has, it really has, but the journey doesn't have to end here.
That's right.
I mean, we've given you the map.
Yes.
Now it's up to you to explore the territory.
Absolutely.
So what does true mastery look like?
Yeah, what does it look like
For you.
for you?
We'd love to hear your thoughts.
Your insights.
Until next time, keep diving deep.
Keep diving.
Welcome back, everybody, to the deep dive. Today we are exploring a core teaching on the Buddhist path to liberation from suffering. It's called right exertion.
Yes.
And we're diving into excerpts from the 4 Right Exertions, The Wings to Awakening from dhammatalks.org.
Okay.
Have you ever felt like you're just spinning your wheels, putting in so much effort but not getting anywhere?
Oh, yeah.
You're working hard, but it's just not leading to where you want to be. Well, it turns out even effort can be skillful or unskillful.
Absolutely. Yeah, it's not just about trying really hard.
Right.
It's about applying effort in a way that actually leads us to be free from suffering.
So, okay, what does right exertion look like?
So the text that we are looking at lays out 4 key aspects of right exertion.
Okay.
First, preventing unskillful qualities from even coming up in the first place.
Okay.
Think of it like stopping negative thoughts before they even kind of take root.
Okay, so like if you notice that little voice of self-doubt creeping in, you just gently redirect your attention.
Exactly. Exactly. Then abandoning unskillful qualities that already exist, that are already there. It's like weeding a garden, pulling those negative thought patterns out by the root.
Right.
So we're clearing the ground for something new to grow.
Yeah.
The third one would be cultivating skillful qualities. So not just weeding the garden, but now we are planting seeds of positivity and mindfulness. We want to see beautiful flowers bloom there instead.
That makes sense. And what's the last one?
Maintaining those skillful qualities that have already been developed. Tending to the garden.
Gotcha. Tending.
Nurturing those positive qualities so they can really flourish.
So it's kind of amazing how these 4 aspects work together. It's not step by step, right? Like sometimes focusing on cultivating the positive can naturally help us let go of the negative.
Absolutely. It's all intertwined.
Right.
But there's this really interesting twist that I found in this text.
Okay.
It talks about the role of desire
Oh.
in right exertion.
Really?
Creating.
I always thought Buddhism was all about reducing craving and desire.
Yeah, it seems very counterintuitive.
Right. Like how can desire even be a factor in achieving liberation?
It's all about understanding the difference between skillful and unskillful desire.
Okay.
Buddhism doesn't say desire is bad.
Okay.
It encourages us to understand which desires lead us towards freedom and which ones keep us stuck in suffering.
So, okay, can you give me a concrete example? What does a skillful desire look like compared to an unskillful desire?
Yeah, so imagine you've had a big piece of cake
Okay.
and you are full, but you still really crave that second piece of cake.
Yeah.
That's a classic unskillful desire. It's just driven by attachment. It leads to more craving.
Gotcha. So what's an example of skillful desire?
Like a desire to help other people, or maybe like the longing to understand yourself more deeply,
Mm-hmm.
to yearn for wisdom and compassion.
Okay.
These are desires that fuel our spiritual growth,
Gotcha.
and they can lead to greater freedom.
So skillful desire is actually a powerful force for good. It's not something to be suppressed.
Right.
It's something to be directed towards something meaningful.
Exactly.
Yeah.
It's like, right, exertion is about skillfully harnessing that desire,
Okay.
using it as fuel to cultivate and maintain the qualities that lead to liberation.
Okay, so it's not just about being good or being a good person. It's about going even deeper than that, transcending skillfulness.
Exactly. Yeah, that's where real freedom lies.
Wow, that's a mind-bending concept. So it's not about reaching some static state of perfect behavior.
Right.
It's more about constantly refining our understanding and even letting go of the need to be skillful.
Exactly.
Wow.
Yeah. As we delve deeper into right exertion, we'll see just how nuanced and transformative this practice can be.
Okay, I'm ready to go deeper. The text also talks about how the effort itself has to be skillful. What does that mean? Like, can you be putting in effort the wrong way?
Exactly. Unskillful effort can backfire and make things worse.
Okay.
For example, if you try to force yourself to stop being angry,
Yeah.
that often just makes you more angry.
Oh, I've definitely been there. It's like trying to hold a beach ball underwater. The more you push it down, the harder it's going to pop back up.
Yeah, that's a perfect analogy. Instead of suppressing those difficult emotions, right exertion encourages us to understand them, to investigate their roots, and practice compassion towards ourselves.
So it's more about working with our minds rather than against them.
Yes.
What kind of tools does right exertion give us to work with?
The text highlights several key tools, including mindfulness, discernment, and even the jhanas, those states of meditative absorption.
Wait, the jhanas. I thought those were all about blissing out, not putting in effort.
It's true that the jhanas involve profound states of peace and joy, but they're cultivated through right effort.
Okay.
They're like training grounds for the mind,
Okay.
refining our attention
Okay.
and deepening our concentration.
So it's like the more we develop these qualities, mindfulness, discernment, the ability to access the jhanas, the more skillful our effort becomes.
Exactly.
It's like this positive feedback loop.
Exactly. It's a ongoing process of refinement and growth.
Okay, so there's one more piece to this puzzle. The text outlines 7 specific ways to abandon unskillful qualities.
Yes.
7 ways. Okay, give me the rundown.
They are seeing, restraining, using, tolerating, avoiding, destroying, and developing.
So we have this whole toolbox of 7 approaches to working with difficult thoughts and emotions.
Exactly.
But the text doesn't specify which tool to use when.
Right. And that's where the real learning begins. It's about developing the discernment to understand what works best for each situation.
So it's like we're being asked to become our own inner scientists.
Yeah.
Experimenting and observing what helps us cultivate greater freedom and well-being.
You got it. And that's what makes right exertion such an empowering practice. It's not about blindly following rules. It's about developing the wisdom to navigate the complexities of our own minds.
This is giving me a lot to think about. But before we move on, one question that keeps popping up for me is there like a right amount of effort we should be putting in? Or does it vary depending on the person and the situation?
That's a great question, and it leads us to another intriguing point in the text. It acknowledges that the amount of effort needed can vary greatly.
You're kidding. It actually says that. For some people, practice can be painful and slow, while for others, it's pleasant and quick.
Yes, the Buddha recognized that people are different, and the same practice can have different effects on different people.
So there's no magic formula, no one-size-fits-all approach to right exertion.
That's right, there isn't.
That's both challenging and liberating at the same time.
Yes, it is.
It challenges us to pay attention to our own inner landscape,
Right?
and to adjust our efforts accordingly.
Exactly.
There's no room for dogma or rigidity in right exertion.
That's right.
This is making me rethink everything I thought I knew about effort. It's so much more nuanced than I realized. Okay, before we wrap up this part of our deep dive, there's one more piece of the text that I wanted to touch on.
Okay.
And that is the idea that right exertion isn't about returning to a childlike state of mind.
Ah, yes, that's a common misconception about spiritual practice.
Really?
Many people assume that the goal is to recapture the purity and innocence of childhood.
I have to admit, I kind of thought that was the goal too. What's wrong with aiming for that childlike state of mind?
Well, from a Buddhist perspective, the child's mind, while seemingly pure, is actually full of ignorance. It lacks the wisdom and discernment that come with experience and conscious development.
Okay, that makes sense. So it's not about regressing, it's about evolving consciously.
Exactly. Right, exertion isn't about going backwards. It's about refining and developing our minds so that we can fully awaken to our true potential.
This is blowing my mind wide open. Okay, so if the childlike mind isn't the ultimate goal of right exertion, what is?
Well, to answer that, we need to explore another fascinating passage from the text. It involves a dialogue between the Buddha and a diva about the art of crossing the flood.
Crossing the flood, that sounds intriguing. Can't wait to hear more about that.
This passage about crossing the flood, it really gets to the heart of how we often misunderstand effort.
Okay, yeah, I'm all ears. Remind me, how does that story go again?
So the Buddha is asked how he crossed over the flood.
Right.
And his answer is anything but straightforward. He says, I crossed over the flood without pushing forward, without staying in place.
Okay.
And when pressed for details, he adds, when I pushed forward, I was whirled about. When I stayed in place, I sank.
That's a pretty cryptic answer. How can you cross a flood without either moving forward or staying still?
It's brilliant, really. The Buddha is pointing out that our usual ways of thinking about effort as either like striving really intensely
Right.
or becoming passive,
Yeah.
those are actually traps.
Okay.
They don't lead to true liberation.
So it's not about finding the perfect middle ground.
Not exactly. It's about transcending that binary thinking altogether. The image of crossing the flood points to a state of balanced awareness,
Okay.
where we're neither rigidly pushing nor passively allowing ourselves to be swept away
Yeah.
by the current of our thoughts and emotions.
So it's more about finding a flow state, like we're engaged with what's happening but not attached to the outcome.
Yeah,
So we're putting in the effort, but there's a sense of ease or non-striving.
that's a great way to put it, yeah. And this state of balanced awareness, it's not something we achieve once and for all.
Right.
It's something that we cultivate through the ongoing practice of right exertion.
So it's not like reaching the other side of the river and being done. We're constantly navigating the flow, finding that sweet spot between effort and ease.
Precisely. And this skillful navigation is what ultimately leads to liberation.
Okay.
It's about freeing ourselves from the very things that cause us to struggle, to push and pull, to stink or be swept away.
This is making me realize that, right, exertion isn't just about like meditating for hours on end. It's about bringing that same quality of mindful awareness
Right.
and skillful effort to everything we do.
Absolutely. Yeah. It's about infusing our everyday lives,
Right.
our relationships, our work, our interactions with the world, with that same spirit of mindful engagement.
You know, those 7 ways of abandoning unskillful qualities you mentioned earlier?
Right.
They're starting to make a lot more sense now in light of this crossing the flood analogy.
I'm glad you brought that up. Yeah. Those 7 ways, seeing, restraining, using, tolerating, avoiding, destroying, and developing,
Okay.
those become our tools for navigating that flood of our experience.
So sometimes we need to restrain ourselves from negative patterns, sometimes we need to actively cultivate positive qualities, and sometimes we simply need to observe and tolerate what's happening without getting swept away by it.
Exactly. And the key is to use discernment, to choose the most skillful approach for each moment. It's about responding to life's challenges with wisdom and compassion rather than reacting habitually.
That makes sense. But honestly, I think it's so easy to fall into the trap of either over-efforting or under-efforting. Like sometimes I get so fixated on trying to fix things
Right.
that I just create more stress.
Yeah.
And other times I just want to check out and avoid dealing with things altogether.
It's a common struggle, and it highlights why cultivating mindfulness and discernment is so essential to right exertion.
Right.
These qualities help us find that middle path, that balanced approach to effort, where we're neither overly striving nor passively giving up.
So it's like we need to constantly be checking in with ourselves, asking what's the most skillful way to respond to this situation right now?
Yes,
What does right exertion look like in this moment?
you nailed it. Yeah. It's an ongoing process of self-reflection
Okay.
and adjustment. It's about becoming more attuned to our inner landscape and responding to life's challenges with wisdom and compassion.
You mentioned earlier that the jhanas, those states of meditative absorption, are also important tools for right exertion, but I'm still a little fuzzy on how they fit into this picture.
That's a great question. The jhanas are often misunderstood as being solely about blissful states of mind,
Right?
but they actually play a really vital role in cultivating right exertion.
So there's more to it than just feeling good.
Exactly. The jhanas are developed through sustained, skillful effort.
Okay.
They refine our minds, making them more stable, clear, and receptive.
Okay.
And this refined state of mind makes it easier to see things clearly and to respond to challenges with greater skill and ease.
So the jhanas help us to cultivate those very qualities: mindfulness, discernment, balanced effort,
Yes,
that are essential for navigating the flood of our experience.
precisely. They're like a training ground for the mind, helping us to develop the inner strength and clarity needed to live a life of greater freedom and well-being.
Wow, that's a powerful insight. The jhanas aren't just about seeking blissful states, but about training our minds to be more skillful in all aspects of life.
Exactly. They empower us to respond to life challenges with greater wisdom and compassion rather than reacting habitually.
Okay, I'm starting to see how all these pieces fit together. We've got the 4 aspects of right exertion,
Yeah.
the importance of skillful desire,
Yes.
the art of navigating the flood,
Right.
the 7 ways of working with unskillful qualities, and the transformative power of the jhanas.
It's all interconnected, right? Exertion is a holistic practice, encompassing all aspects of our being.
Okay.
It's about bringing a quality of conscious awareness and skillful effort to every moment of our lives.
It's not just about sitting on a cushion and meditating. It's about living our lives with intention, wisdom, and compassion.
You got it. Yeah. It's about waking up to the fullness of our potential and living in a way that reflects that awakening.
Before we wrap up this part of our deep dive, there's one more passage from the text I wanted to touch on. It outlines 5 key factors that support right exertion: conviction, health, honesty, persistence, and discernment.
Ah, yes. Those 5 factors are like pillars that support our practice, reminding us of the qualities we need to cultivate in order to walk this path with resilience and clarity.
I love that analogy. So let's break these down one by one. What does conviction mean in the context of right exertion?
Conviction refers to having faith in the path, a deep trust in the teachings, and a belief in the possibility of awakening.
Okay.
It's not blind faith. It's a reasoned confidence that comes from seeing the fruits of the practice in our own lives and in the lives of others.
So it's about trusting the process even when things get tough.
Exactly. And that trust is fueled by experience. As we practice right exertion, we begin to see firsthand the transformative power of this path.
Okay, that makes sense. What about health? Why is that so important for right exertion?
Well, if we are physically or mentally unwell, it can be incredibly difficult to generate and sustain effort. Think about it. If you're exhausted or in pain, you're not going to have the energy or focus needed to practice right exertion.
It's like trying to climb a mountain with a broken leg.
Exactly. Taking care of our physical and mental well-being is essential for supporting our practice. It provides the foundation we need to engage in right exertion.
Okay, what about honesty? How does that factor into right exertion?
Honesty is about being truthful with ourselves and others about where we are on the path. It's about acknowledging our strengths and weaknesses, our successes and our struggles.
So it's about dropping the pretense and being authentic.
Precisely. Pretense only creates more suffering.
Okay.
It prevents us from seeing ourselves clearly and from receiving the support we need.
So honesty helps us to stay grounded in reality.
Exactly.
Okay. What about persistence? I think we all know what that means, sticking with it even when the going gets tough.
You got it. Persistence is about cultivating a quality of determination and resilience. It's about remembering why we are practicing in the first place and not giving up on ourselves or the path.
Right. Exertion is a marathon, not a sprint, right? It requires patience
Yeah,
and a willingness to keep going even when we stumble.
that's a great way to put it. And finally, we have discernment.
Right.
We've talked about this quite a bit already.
Yeah.
But can you remind us why it's so important for right exertion? Discernment is the ability to see clearly, to distinguish between skillful and unskillful thoughts, actions, and intentions. It's like having a wise inner compass that guides our choices and helps us navigate the complexities of life.
So it's what helps us choose the right tool from that toolbox
Exactly.
of 7 ways to abandon unskillful qualities.
Exactly. Discernment is what allows us to respond to each moment with wisdom and skill.
This has been a truly illuminating exploration of right exertion. I feel like I'm starting to understand what it means to put in effort the right way.
And that understanding is the foundation for embodying this practice in our lives.
Absolutely. It's one thing to know about right exertion. It's another to actually live it.
So as we wrap up our deep dive into right exertion,
Right.
what are some key takeaways that our listeners can apply to their own lives?
Yeah, that's a good question. What are some things that really stood out to you? What do we want people to take away from this?
Well, one of the biggest things I think is that right exertion is an ongoing practice.
Okay.
It's not a destination.
Gotcha.
It's a process of, weaving mindful awareness,
Right.
clear intention,
Yeah.
and skillful action into every aspect of our lives.
So it's not about reaching some perfect state of, effortlessness or something.
Right, exactly.
It's more about showing up each day.
Yes,
And making conscious choices that align with our values and what we're trying to cultivate.
absolutely. And it requires a willingness to experiment, to pay attention to what works and what doesn't work for us,
Right.
and to adapt our approach accordingly. Each person's journey is unique. So what works for one person might not work for another.
And we can't forget about the role of skillful desire, right?
Yeah.
It's about understanding that desire itself isn't the problem. It's about harnessing our desires and directing them towards something meaningful
Yes.
that contributes to our own well-being and the well-being of others.
Yeah, that's such an important point. It's about transforming desire from a source of suffering into a source of positive change.
Yeah.
Think of it like this. The same energy that can fuel addictive behaviors can also fuel our deepest aspirations.
Right.
It's all about where we choose to direct that energy.
I also love that image of crossing the flood without pushing forward or staying in place.
Yeah, it's so powerful.
It's such a good reminder to find that middle path, that balanced approach to effort, where we're neither overly striving nor passively resigning ourselves to the currents of life.
It really speaks to the heart of right exertion, yeah.
Yeah.
It's about finding that sweet spot where we're engaged with what's happening, we're putting in effort, but we're also allowing things to unfold naturally without forcing or resisting.
And remembering those 5 factors for exertion, conviction, health, honesty, persistence, and discernment can provide a roadmap for cultivating and sustaining this practice.
Exactly. Those 5 factors are like pillars that support our efforts, reminding us of the qualities we need to cultivate to walk this path with resilience and clarity.
It's almost like having a checklist to refer to when we feel lost or discouraged.
Yeah.
We can ask ourselves, do I have conviction in the path? Am I taking care of my health? Am I being honest with myself? Am I persisting even when things get tough? Am I using discernment to guide my choices?
Those are really powerful questions to reflect on.
Right.
And if we find that we're lacking in one of those areas, we can focus our energy on cultivating that particular quality.
So if our listeners are feeling stuck, or frustrated, like they're putting in a lot of effort but not getting anywhere,
Right.
what would you recommend?
Well, I would encourage them to reflect on these teachings
Okay.
and ask themselves, where in my life could I apply right exertion right now? What would skillful effort look like in this particular situation?
So maybe it's about setting healthy boundaries in a relationship or finally committing to that daily meditation practice we've been putting off.
Yeah, or maybe it's simply about bringing more awareness to our thoughts, words, and actions throughout the day. It doesn't have to be some grand gesture. Even small shifts in our awareness and intention can make a big difference over time.
I think it's also important to remember that this is a lifelong journey, right? There will be times when we fall short,
Of course.
when we get caught up in old patterns,
Absolutely.
when we feel discouraged or lost.
Yeah, that's part of the process.
It's inevitable.
Yeah, the key is to not judge ourselves when we stumble, but to simply acknowledge what's happening, learn from it, and keep moving forward. Remember that self-compassion is an essential ingredient in right exertion.
That's a beautiful reminder. It's not about being perfect,
Right.
but about showing up with an open heart and a willingness to learn and grow.
Exactly.
So much of this path is about cultivating kindness and patience,
Yeah.
both toward ourselves and others.
Yeah.
Right? Exertion isn't about forcing ourselves to become something we're not. It's about uncovering our true nature, our innate capacity for wisdom and compassion,
Right.
and allowing that to shine through.
That's it.
This has been such an inspiring and thought-provoking deep dive into right exertion. I feel like we've only just scratched the surface of this profound teaching,
Yeah.
but I'm already feeling a renewed sense of purpose and possibility.
I feel the same way. It's amazing how revisiting familiar teachings can spark new insights and inspire us to deepen our practice.
Thank you so much for sharing your wisdom and insights with us today. I know our listeners are going to walk away from this deep dive feeling empowered and inspired to put these teachings into practice.
It's been my pleasure. May we all continue to explore this path of right exertion with courage, curiosity, and a deep commitment to awakening.
And until next time, keep diving deep.
Ever feel like your mind is just all over the place? Constantly pulled in a million different directions.
Oh yeah, I know that feeling.
Well, you're not alone. It turns out there's this ancient Buddhist teaching called Satipatthana.
Satipatthana.
Yeah, it's often translated as frames of reference, and it really gets into that monkey mind problem.
Interesting.
Yeah. It's kind of like mental fitness, but backed up with centuries of wisdom.
I like the sound of that. So where do we start with this Satipatthana thing?
Well, today we're using The Winds to Awakening from dhammatalks.org as our guide.
Okay, cool. I'm ready to dive in. What's the main idea here?
The really interesting thing about Satipatthana is that it's not just about what you focus on.
Okay.
It's also about how you're paying attention to that thing.
It's not just what, but how.
Exactly. And the word itself refers to both the object of focus and the focused awareness.
That's pretty cool.
It is. It's like, say you're using a camera. The same scene could look completely different depending on the lens you use, right?
Oh yeah, for sure. Like a wide angle versus a zoom lens.
Exactly. And in this system, we have 4 main lenses or frames of reference.
Okay, I'm intrigued. What are they?
They are body, feelings, mind, and mental qualities.
So like the whole spectrum of human experience.
Exactly. And the text really stresses examining each of these in and of itself.
In and of itself. What does that even mean?
It means we're observing these things directly, without getting caught up in our usual judgments or stories.
Ah, I see. So like a pure observation.
Yeah, like that. The source uses this great analogy. Imagine holding an object in your hand. You might feel other things brushing against you, but your focus stays steady on the object.
Okay, yeah, I get that. So it's about cultivating that unwavering attention.
Yes, and through that attention, we can start to develop beneficial mental qualities. These are called Dhammas in the Buddhist teachings.
Dhammas. So we're talking about like positive thinking now.
It's way more dynamic than just thinking positive. We're talking about a serious mental workout.
Okay, a mental workout. Tell me more.
It's about weakening those mental habits that cause us suffering. Things like distraction and anger.
Right, those are definitely not helpful.
And then it's about strengthening those qualities that bring us peace and clarity, like focus and equanimity.
I like where this is going. So how does this mental workout actually happen?
Well, like any good workout, there are stages, 3 stages actually.
Only stages. All right, lay it on me.
And the text uses the body as our first example to break it down.
The body makes sense. It's something we all have.
Exactly. So stage 1 is all about establishing that frame of reference, getting familiar with it.
Okay, getting familiar with our body, what does that look like?
The text talks about remaining focused on the body. And there's a specific word they use, anupasan.
Anupasan, huh?
Yeah, it means keeping track of the body. So it's not just passively observing, it's about actively paying attention.
Right, so there's real effort involved. You're locked in.
Exactly. And the text says there are 3 key qualities that makes this possible.
Okay, I'm ready. Let's hear them.
Being ardent, alert, and mindful.
Ardent, alert, mindful. Got it.
But they're not just buzzwords. These describe this synergy of mental effort and sharp awareness.
Ooh, I like that. Sounds powerful.
It is. It's like this mental power trio. And this actually ties into a lot of the modern mindfulness practices people might already be familiar with. Things like mental noting.
Mental noting.
Yeah, mindfulness is that remembering to note things.
Okay.
Alertness is that quick recognition of what's popping up in your awareness.
Mm-hmm.
And then ardency is sticking with it and getting more precise with each observation.
I see those connections.
You see the same thing in body scanning too. Mindfulness is the actual scanning process. Alertness is that sensitivity to each sensation.
Yeah, that makes sense.
And even in good old breath meditation, we see it. Mindfulness is staying with the breath.
Right.
Alertness is noticing all the subtle qualities of breathing in and out. And then ardency shows up in how we move through different stages of training, like feeling the whole body with the breath or calming the breath down.
Wow, those are some great connections. So we've established our frame, we're getting familiar with the body. What's next?
Well, once we've established the frame, we move on to stage 2. This is called developing the frame.
Okay, we've hit the mental gym, built some foundational strength. What does developing the frame look like?
This is where we start to observe the arising and passing away of, well, everything. Not just the body, but also feelings, thoughts, and even those mental qualities we're working on.
So like how everything is interconnected, like you feel a tightness in your chest and suddenly a whole bunch of anxious thoughts appear?
You got it. It's about becoming a detective of your inner world, noticing those patterns and how they all relate.
That sounds fascinating.
It is. But it's not just passively observing, right? It's about learning to skillfully work with those patterns.
You're exactly right. The text even makes this analogy to cooking. We learn about our minds by skillfully experimenting with them, not just by reading about them.
That makes a lot of sense. So instead of just reading a cookbook, we need to get in the kitchen and get our hands dirty.
Exactly. For example, the text talks about developing equanimity. First, you just notice when it's there or not. Then you get skillful at bringing it about and making it stronger.
So it's like you're a novice cook at first, but you keep practicing and experimenting until you become a master chef. And you're saying that applies to our mental states too.
Precisely. It's about moving beyond simple awareness into skillfully manipulating our minds. Learning to guide your inner experience with more and more precision.
Okay, I could see why you call this a mental workout. So what about this third stage, that culminating equipoise thing?
Now that's where things get really interesting and maybe a little mysterious. It's about reaching a state of perception that the text calls emptiness. Freedom from clinging to those fixed ideas and stories we make about ourselves and the world.
Okay, emptiness. That sounds deep. I have a feeling it's not just about deciding to let go of everything.
No, not at all. It's about cultivating a deep understanding of the true nature of things. And that comes from working through stages 1 and 2.
So there are no shortcuts to blissful detachment, huh? Got to put in the work.
Exactly. But we can dive deeper into that in the next segment.
All right, listeners, we've laid the groundwork. We've got our 4 frames of reference, our 3 stages of training. Things are about to get real interesting, so don't go anywhere. All right, welcome back, deep divers. So last time, We got a pretty good intro to 𝙀𝙀𝙖𝙞𝙀.
Yeah, those frames of reference for, training our minds.
Exactly. And I'm really curious to see how those stages of training, how they actually play out.
Well, let's jump back into stage 2, where we're really working with the frame we've established.
Okay, so we've hit the gym, build up some strength. What's next? What's this developing the frame all about?
So in stage 2, we start observing this arising and passing away of, well, everything, not just in the body, but, feelings, thoughts, and even those mental qualities we're trying to cultivate.
So everything's kind of in this constant flow. Like we're noticing not just, oh, there's a thought, but, oh, that thought led to like this whole wave of tension in my body.
Yeah, exactly. And to really get this, the text uses breathing as an example.
Breathing. Okay, that makes sense. It's something we all do, right?
Right. So say you've chosen the body as your frame of reference. You're focusing on it, and you're going to notice each breath arising and passing away. But it's not just, oh, I'm breathing. It's more like really feeling those subtle sensations of each inhale and exhale.
It's funny you say that because just yesterday I was feeling super anxious and I realized like I was barely breathing, all shallow, and my chest felt so tight.
That's a perfect example of how paying attention to the breath can show you so much about your inner state. And once you start to see those patterns, the connections between breath, body, feelings, and thoughts, well, that's where the magic happens.
It's almost like becoming a scientist of your own experience, gathering data, figuring out how everything works.
Exactly. And with that understanding, comes this ability to work skillfully with your mind. You learn to respond to challenges better. And the text is really clear. It's not just about passively watching your mental states.
So there's more to it than just watching. What else is there?
It's about learning to manipulate them.
Manipulate? Hold on, isn't that a bit strong? Like, are we trying to control everything now?
That's a great question, and it's important to really get what the text is saying here. It's not about forcing things or suppressing emotions. Think of it more like learning a new skill, like say playing the piano. You don't just sit down and bam, you're playing Mozart flawlessly, right? You got to practice, experiment, you make mistakes along the way.
Okay, so we're approaching our mental states with that same curiosity and willingness to try things out. We're not trying to be dictators of our minds, but more like skilled conductors, I guess.
There you go. That's a great way to put it. And the text even offers some specific ways to do this. Like when you notice some unskillful mental state, something like distraction or agitation, see if you can manipulate it. Can you shift focus, change the intensity of the feeling? It's about figuring out what works for you.
Oh, that's cool. It's almost like we're testing our mental flexibility. Like how much bandwidth do we have?
And the more you practice, the more refined your skills get. Maybe you start by noticing those big distractions, but over time, you'll see those subtler, sneakier ones. It's like upgrading your mental software.
Makes total sense. And this really shows how important patience and self-compassion are in this process. We're not going to become mental ninjas overnight, right?
You got it. It's a journey, a process of discovery and refinement. And eventually, this journey leads to stage 3, that culminating equipoise we mentioned.
All right, let's talk about this stage 3. You said earlier it has to do with that emptiness idea. But before we get into that, can we clarify what that even means?
You bet. It's one of those terms that gets tossed around a lot, but can be tricky to grasp. Here, in this context, emptiness isn't about nothing mattering or life being meaningless. It's more about understanding that everything is impermanent and interconnected, and that, our suffering comes from clinging to things as if they were solid and lasting.
So it's like realizing we're not as solid and separate as we think we are. We're part of this ever-changing flow of experience.
That's it. And when you start seeing things like this, that grip of those fixed ideas and stories about yourself and the world, it starts to loosen up. You get less attached to what you can't control, and it opens up a whole new way of experiencing life.
Wow, that's a pretty big shift in perspective. So how does this emptiness thing connect with that whole mental fitness idea?
Well, think about it. We waste so much mental energy clinging to stuff we can't control, worrying about the past, obsessing over the future, resisting change. Emptiness is like hitting the reset button, freeing up all that energy for what truly matters, being present, connecting with others, living a life that's, aligned with our values.
So it's not just about feeling calm and peaceful. It's about having those mental resources available to really engage with life in a skillful and meaningful way.
Exactly. And that's where the real power of 𝙀𝙀𝙖𝙞𝙀 is. It's not just about escaping from suffering. It's about equipping ourselves to face life's challenges with wisdom and compassion.
I'm starting to get how these seemingly simple practices, like paying attention to your breath, noticing thoughts and feelings, can have such a huge impact.
And don't forget, the text actually says even practicing these techniques for a short time, even a week, can have significant results.
That's pretty encouraging. It makes me wonder what kind of transformations would be possible if we really committed to this path.
That's a great question, and it's something worth exploring. In fact, in our last segment, we'll dive into some specific examples from the text that show just how powerful these teachings can be.
Okay, listeners, don't go anywhere. We're going to uncover the real-world benefits of this ancient wisdom. You won't want to miss it.
Okay, deep divers, we are back for our final deep dive into Satipina,
Those Buddhist frames of reference for training the mind.
That's it. Last time, we were getting into some pretty deep stuff, like that concept of emptiness.
Yeah, that can be a tricky one.
It can, but I'm really interested to see how all this, plays out in real life, Well, one of the most powerful examples the text gives is the practice of contemplating the body.
Okay, wait, hold on. Contemplating the body. I'm already feeling a little,
Yeah, no, it sounds like we're about to launch into another lecture on body image, but trust me.
Okay.
This is different.
All right, you got my attention. What's so different about it?
It's about seeing the body, any body, with this really clear and compassionate awareness. The text wants us to see past those judgments we make about beauty and attractiveness,
So ditch the rose-colored glasses and see things as they are.
Exactly. And this practice can be really helpful for anyone who struggles with body image stuff. When we stop comparing ourselves to these airbrushed ideas, we can start to appreciate our bodies for what they are. These incredible vessels that carry us through life.
I love that. It's like shifting from judgment to acceptance, even gratitude, I guess. But the text takes it even further, right?
You're right. It says this practice of really seeing the body clearly can actually help us break free from lust and desire.
Whoa. Okay, now I'm really interested. How does that work?
Well, when we get all caught up in desire and craving, we're usually focused on this really superficial and idealized version of the body. We're not seeing the whole picture,
Right.
But when we can look deeper, see the reality, flesh and bones and all that, those cravings can start to loosen their grip.
It's like the text is saying, don't be fooled by the shiny packaging. Look at what's really inside, which might not be so glamorous.
Exactly. And it can be incredibly freeing. You realize all those external things we chase after, they don't actually hold the power we think they do.
It's like all that glitters is not gold. Appearances can be so deceiving, but this practice, it helps us see beyond the illusion.
And the text keeps going with this. It even talks about contemplating the body in terms of the elements, earth, water, fire, and air.
Oh, wow, elements. That reminds me of Ayurveda. Is there a connection there?
Absolutely. Lots of wisdom traditions use this idea of seeing the body as made up of these elements. And it's not just some abstract idea. It's a powerful way to deconstruct that feeling of a solid self that we cling to so tightly.
It's like realizing we're not as fixed and unchanging as we think we are, that we're in constant flux, like the elements themselves.
That's a great way to put it. And that realization, it can be humbling, but also really freeing.
Humbling because, we're not the center of the universe after all. And freeing because we don't have to try and control everything.
And that brings us full circle back to that culminating equipoise. Remember, that freedom from clinging and fabrication, all these practices are leading us there, helping us to wake up to reality.
Something that stood out to me in the text was how it emphasized that when we cultivate our own mental balance, it actually benefits others.
Absolutely. Remember that analogy with the two acrobats balancing on a pole? If one falls, they both go down.
Right. It's like our mental and emotional states are all interconnected.
They are. We're influencing each other all the time, whether we realize it or not.
It's like you got to put on your own oxygen mask first before helping anyone else.
That's a great analogy. When we're all caught up in our own reactivity, our negativity, it's like this ripple effect, spreading all that stress and suffering to everyone around us.
Yeah, it's true. Hurt people, as they say.
Exactly. But the opposite is also true. When your mind is calm and balanced, it radiates peace and kindness. It can have a calming effect on everyone around you.
So we can actually be like agents of peace and healing just by working on our own inner stability.
Yes, healed people heal people.
Wow, I love that. So, where does all this lead?
Well, the text describes the qualities of a fully awakened being, someone who has reached that ultimate level of mastery.
Okay.
And one of those qualities is being totally unfazed by whether people accept or reject their teachings.
Wow, that's some serious equanimity. It's like saying, here's this wisdom, take it or leave it, I'm good either way.
Exactly. It points to a level of inner peace that's totally independent of outside circumstances. It really challenges that idea that Buddhism is about withdrawing from the world.
Yeah, it seems like the opposite, really. By cultivating this inner peace, this wisdom, we become even more capable of engaging with the world in a skillful and compassionate way.
Beautifully said. And it all starts with these, seemingly simple practices, paying attention, becoming aware, and understanding the true nature of reality.
Well, deep divers, it looks like we've reached the end of our exploration of Satipatthana. And I have to say, this has been an incredible journey.
It has. It's been a real pleasure to share these teachings.
I know, I'm leaving feeling really inspired to, put these practices into action in my own life.
Me too. And remember, even a little effort can go a long way, so why not give it a try?
You never know what transformations might be waiting for you. Until next time, deep divers, keep exploring, keep practicing, and may your journey be full of peace, wisdom, and of course, unshakable equanimity.
See you next time. All right, let's jump into another deep dive. Today, we're going to be looking at some really fascinating Buddhist teachings.
Okay.
They're called the 7 Sets as Wings to Awakening.
Ooh.
And we're taking these from dhammatalks.org.
Okay.
Have you ever felt like you're constantly striving for something more?
Mm-hmm.
Like there's a deeper understanding or peace you just can't quite reach?
Yeah.
Well, that's kind of what we're going to be unpacking today.
It's a bit like we all have these wings.
Okay.
But we haven't quite figured out how to use them yet.
Right.
And these 7 sets, they act like a guide showing us how to strengthen those wings.
Right, like that.
And use them to reach that state of awakening.
Okay, so no literal wings then.
No.
But what are these 7 sets? It
Right.
sounds a bit like a secret society.
Not quite a secret society.
Okay.
But definitely, a powerful framework for understanding that path to enlightenment.
Okay.
Think of them as groups of qualities that the Buddha himself emphasized. We're talking about the 4 frames of reference,
Okay.
4 right exertions, 4 bases of power, 5 faculties, 5 strengths, 7 factors for awakening, and of course the one you've probably heard of, the Noble Eightfold Path.
Wow, that's a lot of 4s and 5s.
Yeah.
Okay, so the Noble Eightfold Path rings a bell, but the rest are pretty new to me. I'm already feeling a bit overwhelmed, to be honest.
I understand. Yeah. Like walking into a library for the first time.
Right.
So many books, where you even begin. But that's why we're here. Instead of getting lost in the stacks, we're going to focus on the most important sections.
Okay, that makes me feel better. So are these sets all totally separate, or do they kind of all work together?
That's where it gets really interesting. The source actually compares these sets to the 7 treasures of a universal monarch, implying they all have immense value.
Right.
And work together as a whole.
Gotcha.
Think of them as pieces of a puzzle.
Okay.
Each one contributes to the bigger picture of Buddhist practice.
So instead of getting bogged down in all 7 at once, maybe we should focus on one set for this first part of our deep dive.
I think that's an excellent approach.
What do you think?
Yeah, I think so.
Okay.
And since virtue is considered the foundation for all the other sets,
Okay.
let's start with something called the 4 right exertions.
Okay.
These are all about putting in the effort
Okay.
to cultivate positive qualities and ditch the negative ones.
Effort, huh? So this isn't just about wishing for good things to happen.
Right.
It's about actively shaping your mind.
Precisely. It's like, have you ever tried to break a bad habit?
Oh, yeah.
Like, let's say you want to stop procrastinating.
Uh-huh.
The 4 right exertions would say first you need to be mindful of when you're about to procrastinate.
Okay.
Catch yourself before you fall into that old pattern.
Okay, I can see that. Awareness is definitely the first step. So what's the next exertion?
The second is to actively abandon that bad habit once you realize it's happening. It's not enough to just notice it.
Right.
You have to make a conscious effort to step away from the computer, put down the phone, and get to work.
So it's like saying, nope, not going to let this control me anymore, and actually doing something different.
Yes.
What about the other 2 exertions?
Well, once you've started tackling those negative patterns,
Okay.
the third exertion is to focus on developing positive habits
Okay.
that support your goals.
Okay.
Maybe you create a schedule or find a study buddy or reward yourself for staying on track.
Uh-huh.
It's about actively cultivating those good habits you want to see grow.
Right. So you're not just trying to not procrastinate, but you're actively building new habits that make it harder to even fall into that trap in the first place.
Exactly. And the fourth exertion is about maintaining those positive habits over time. Because, let's be real, it's easy to get excited about a new routine for a week or 2.
Yeah.
But then life happens, and we slip back into old patterns.
Yeah.
This exertion reminds us to keep nurturing those good habits,
Okay.
so they become a stable part of who we are.
So it's like once you've built those positive habits, you need to keep watering them, giving them sunshine so they can really flourish.
I love that analogy. That's precisely what the 4 right exertions encourage.
Yeah.
A consistent and mindful effort to shape our minds and our actions in a positive direction.
Okay, I'm starting to see why virtue is considered the foundation here. You're not just trying to reach some abstract state of enlightenment. You're actively building a better version of yourself right here, right now.
That's a great way to put it. And, it's not just about achieving some lofty spiritual goal either.
Right.
Think about how much peace and contentment you could find in your daily life.
Yeah.
Just by applying these 4 principles.
Imagine if you could apply this to every area of your life, your relationships, your work, your health. You could really transform your experience just by cultivating that mindful effort.
Exactly. And that's just one of the 7 sets.
Right.
You've got a lot more wings to explore.
Oh, man.
Are you ready to unpack the next set?
You know I am. But first, let's pause and let our listener really absorb what we've uncovered so far. Think about the 4 right exertions and how they might apply to your own life. What bad habit could you start tackling today? What positive qualities could you begin to cultivate? We'll be back in a moment to dive into the next set of wings on our journey to awakening.
Yes.
Welcome back. I don't know about you, but my mind is still buzzing from those 4 right exertions. It's amazing how such simple principles can have such a powerful impact.
It's true. Sometimes the simplest tools are the most effective.
Yeah.
And building on that idea of simple but powerful,
Okay.
I think our next set of wings will really resonate with you.
Okay, you've got me intrigued. What are we diving into next?
This time, let's explore the 4 frames of reference.
Okay.
These are all about cultivating mindfulness,
Okay.
that ability to be present and aware of your experience in each moment.
Mindfulness is definitely a hot topic these days. Everyone's talking about meditation apps and mindfulness retreats.
Right.
But what does it actually mean to be mindful, and how do these 4 frames help?
That's a great question.
Yeah.
Think about it this way.
Okay.
We're constantly bombarded with information and distractions.
Right.
Our phones, our to-do lists, our worries about the past, our anxieties about the future.
Uh-huh.
It's easy to get swept away in that current and lose touch with what's actually happening right here, right now.
Oh, tell me about it. I feel like I'm constantly switching between tabs in my brain.
Exactly. And that's where the 4 frames of reference come in. They provide a framework
Okay.
for anchoring our attention to 4 key aspects of our experience.
Okay.
Our body, our feelings, our mind, and our mental objects.
Okay, break that down for me. What does it mean to be mindful of your body, for example?
Okay, so imagine you're eating a meal.
Okay.
Instead of just shoveling food in while you're scrolling through your phone,
Right.
you actually pause and pay attention to the physical sensations of eating. You notice the taste of the food, the texture, the feeling of fullness in your stomach.
Oh, wow. I definitely don't do that most of the time.
That's okay.
Yeah.
Most of us don't. But by bringing that mindful awareness to the simple act of eating, you're actually cultivating a deeper connection with your body
Right.
and your present experience.
So it's not just about being more present while you're eating, but it's about actually savoring the experience.
Exactly. And it's not just about eating either.
Okay.
You can apply this mindfulness of the body to any physical activity, walking, showering, even just sitting at your desk.
Right.
By paying attention to those physical sensations, you're training your mind to stay grounded in the present moment.
Okay, I'm starting to get it. So what about the second frame of reference? Mindfulness of feelings.
This is all about becoming aware of your emotions as they arise, without getting carried away by them. So let's say you're feeling stressed about a deadline at work.
Uh-huh.
Instead of letting that stress consume you, you simply acknowledge it. Okay, I'm feeling stressed right now.
Right.
And then observe it without judgment.
That sounds easier said than done. My stress usually feels like a tidal wave, not something I can just calmly observe.
Of course, it takes practice. But the more you cultivate this mindfulness of feelings,
Right.
the less reactive you become.
Okay.
You start to create a space between yourself and your emotions, which allows you to respond to them in a more skillful way.
So it's about learning to ride the waves of your emotions rather than getting swept away by them.
Beautifully put. Now let's move on to the third frame of reference, mindfulness of the mind itself.
Mindfulness of the mind. Isn't that a bit redundant?
It might sound that way,
Yeah.
but it's actually quite profound.
Okay.
This frame is about observing the nature of your mind. Is it agitated, peaceful, and focused, distracted? You're not trying to change it, just simply noticing its qualities.
So it's like meta-awareness, being aware of your own awareness.
That's a great way to put it.
Okay.
This frame helps us to recognize that our thoughts and feelings are just passing phenomena,
Right.
not solid, unchanging entities.
Okay, that's starting to click for me. And what about the fourth frame? Mindfulness of mental objects.
This one focuses on the content of our minds.
Okay.
The thoughts, ideas, memories, and perceptions that constantly arise.
Right.
Just like with emotions.
Yeah.
We practice observing these mental objects without clinging or aversion.
So instead of getting caught up in a thought spiral, you just notice it and let it pass.
Exactly. You recognize that thoughts are just thoughts.
Right.
They're not necessarily facts.
Right.
And by cultivating this mindful detachment, you free yourself from the tyranny of your own mind.
Wow, these 4 frames of reference are really starting to make sense.
Good.
It's like you're creating this mental space where you can observe your whole experience without getting lost in it.
That's exactly it.
Yeah.
And the beauty of these frames is that you can apply them to any moment of your life.
Right.
You can use them to savor a simple pleasure, navigate a difficult emotion, or simply bring more awareness to your everyday tasks.
It's like having this superpower of mindfulness that you can use to enhance any experience. I love it. Okay, so we've covered the 4 right exertions for cultivating effort and the 4 frames of reference for cultivating mindfulness. What other wings are waiting to be explored?
Well, we're about halfway through our journey through the 7 sets.
Oh, wow.
But I think it's time to pause and let our listener really digest what we've uncovered so far.
Okay.
Think about these 4 frames of reference.
Okay.
Could you pick one and experiment with it for a day? Maybe focus on being more mindful of your body while you're walking or eating.
Right.
Or perhaps you could try observing your emotions with a little more detachment the next time you're feeling stressed. We'll be back soon to explore the next set of wings.
Okay.
But for now, take a deep breath and just be present with what is.
Welcome back to our deep dive into the 7 sets. I'm still trying to wrap my head around those 4 frames of reference.
Yeah.
It's like a whole new way of experiencing the world.
It really is. And you know what we've explored so far?
Mm-hmm.
Effort with the 4 right exertions and mindfulness with the 4 frames of reference.
Right.
They're all laying the groundwork for something truly remarkable.
Okay, you've got me hooked. What's this remarkable thing we're working towards?
Well, we've been talking about the 7 sets as wings to awakening.
Right.
But we haven't really explored what that awakening actually looks like.
Yeah, good point. It's all been a bit abstract so far. But does it actually mean to be awakened in the Buddhist sense?
That's the heart of the matter, isn't it? And it's not just one big ha-ha moment,
Right.
like flipping a switch.
Okay.
The source material actually describes 4 levels of awakening:
Okay.
stream entry, once returning, non-returning, and finally, arahantship.
Whoa, levels of awakening. So it's more like a journey with different milestones along the way.
Exactly. Think of it like climbing a mountain.
Okay.
Each level represents a higher vantage point,
Okay.
a clearer perspective on the nature of reality, and a greater sense of freedom from suffering.
Okay, I'm ready to start climbing. Tell me about the first level stream entry.
Imagine you've been wandering through a dense forest,
Okay.
feeling lost and confused.
Uh-huh.
Then suddenly you stumble upon a clear stream, a path that leads you out of the darkness.
Okay.
That's what stream entry is like.
Gotcha.
It's that first glimpse of clarity, that moment when you realize there's a way out of suffering.
So it's like you finally found the right path and there's no turning back.
Exactly. And at this level, you've started to break free from 3 of the major fetters that keep us bound to that cycle of suffering.
Okay.
Clinging to a fixed sense of self, doubting the Buddha's teachings, and relying on rituals or rules without true understanding.
It's like you're shedding those old limiting beliefs and opening yourself up to a new way of seeing the world.
Yes.
What happens at the next level once returning?
Well, as you continue along this path, you come to another milestone.
Okay.
The source material says at the once returning level,
Okay.
the grip of passion, aversion, and delusion weakens even further. You experience more peace, more clarity, more freedom from those reactive patterns that cause so much suffering.
So those negative emotions that used to control you, they start to lose their power.
Precisely. And what's fascinating is that the source material says someone who's reached this level will only be reborn one more time before reaching full enlightenment.
Wow, that's incredible. Okay, what about non-returning?
Now imagine you've climbed even higher on this mountain,
Uh-huh.
and the view is breathtaking.
Okay.
You can see for miles in every direction.
Okay.
That's what non-returning is like.
Wow.
You've transcended the limitations of this earthly realm,
Right.
and you're on the verge of complete liberation.
It sounds almost like reaching a state of pure bliss.
It's certainly a native profound peace and freedom.
Right.
The source material says that those who reach this level are reborn in a pure and refined realm,
Okay.
called the pure abodes. From there, they'll attain full enlightenment and never return to this cycle of suffering.
Wow, it's like reaching a cosmically safe haven. And finally, we have arahantship, that ultimate peak of awakening. What can you tell me about that?
Arahantship is full and complete enlightenment,
Okay.
the ultimate goal of the Buddhist path.
Right.
It's the complete liberation from all suffering, from the endless cycle of birth and death. At this level, all the fetters that bind us have been shattered.
Right.
and we experience true freedom.
It's like reaching the summit of the mountain, finally free from the weight of all those burdens you've been carrying.
That's a beautiful way to put it. And remember, even though these levels are described as distinct stages, the underlying process of awakening is the same.
Okay.
It's all about cultivating virtue, concentration, and discernment.
So even if we don't reach full enlightenment in this lifetime, we can still benefit from walking this path.
Absolutely. Every step we take towards cultivating those qualities brings us closer to greater peace, wisdom, and compassion.
This whole deep dive has been such an eye-opener. We've explored these 7 sets, these wings to awakening, and I feel like I have a whole new understanding of what's possible.
And remember, these teachings aren't just ancient wisdom.
Right.
They're tools you can use right now to transform your life.
Right.
Think back to those 4 right exertions and the 4 frames of reference.
Right.
You can start applying those principles today.
That's what's so amazing about all this. It's not just some abstract philosophy. It's a practical path to living a more mindful, compassionate, and fulfilling life.
Exactly. And who knows, maybe as we continue to cultivate these qualities, we'll find ourselves soaring to heights we never thought possible.
That's a beautiful thought to end on. Thanks for joining us on this incredible journey through the 7 sets as wings to awakening. May you find peace and clarity on your own path to awakening. Welcome back, everyone. Today we're diving deep into some really fascinating stuff you've all sent in about karma. Specifically, we're going to go beyond the basics. You want to explore how karma shapes our experience, and even more intriguing, how it can be brought to an end.
Right.
So are you ready to unravel this for us?
Absolutely. I'm excited. It's both, it's a profound topic and also incredibly relevant to our lives, you know? So I think it's a really good thing to dive into and see what we can uncover together.
Yeah. Okay, so let's start with what we usually hear about karma. Like, good actions lead to good results, bad actions lead to bad.
Right.
Pretty straightforward, right?
Yeah.
But in the material you sent, there's this hint of something more, like a 4th kind of karma.
Yeah.
What's going on there?
You're right. So that is often how karma is presented. Like, just those 2, good and bad. But it's actually much more nuanced than that. And you've hit upon a key point, which is this 4th type of karma that actually leads to the ending of karma itself.
Whoa! Okay, so not just good or bad karma, but a way to step off the karmic merry-go-round entirely?
Yeah.
That's a game changer.
Yeah.
So can you tell us more about how that works?
Sure. It all comes down to intention. So the Buddha taught that karma isn't just about our physical actions. It's about the mental state behind them. The intention, the thought, the motivation, all of that plays a crucial role.
So it's not just what you do, but why you do it.
Yeah.
That makes sense. And the source material really emphasizes that intention piece, like really over and over. So what does that mean for someone trying to end karma? What do they have to do?
It means cultivating a completely different kind of intention.
Okay.
One that is free from greed, aversion, and delusion.
Okay.
It's about acting from a place of wisdom and compassion.
Okay.
This is how we begin to chip away at the karmic cycle.
So it's like an internal shift, like rewiring our motivations in a way.
Yeah.
But hold on. What about all those classic narratives we hear about with karma?
Right.
You know, past lives, cosmic justice, all that. Don't those play a role?
They can be helping those narratives, and they're very common ways of understanding karma. But to truly grasp the end of karma, we need to move beyond them.
Seriously, why aren't those ideas enough?
Well, they're not wrong. It's just that they keep us thinking in terms of self and other being and non-being.
Okay.
And those frameworks, while they're very familiar, they can actually create a barrier to truly understanding how karma can end.
Okay. You've definitely got my attention. So if those stories aren't the key, what is?
Wow.
What's the alternative that the source material points to?
Yeah. So it's about shifting our focus to the present moment, to our direct experience. The source mentions this term, radical phenomenology.
Okay.
Which might sound intimidating.
Yeah, a little bit.
But it's really just about paying attention to what's happening right now, without getting lost in stories or theories.
So instead of trying to figure out the meaning of a painting, we should just observe the brushstrokes, the colors, the textures, like experience it directly.
Exactly. And that's the power of mindfulness.
Yeah.
By bringing our attention to the present moment without judgment, we start to untangle the karmic knots.
Okay, I'm starting to see how that connects. But the source also talks about this concept of dependent origination.
Right.
Which seems really complex. It's like this intricate web of causes and effects. How does that fit in?
Yeah, so dependent origination is one of the most important teachings in Buddhism. And it's really about understanding that Karma isn't a simple one-to-one equation.
Okay.
It's a chain reaction. One action leads to another, creating this complex web of interconnected causes and effects.
Right, right. So the source uses the analogy of a chain where each link represents a different factor that contributes to our experience.
Right.
And then it goes on to say that ignorance is like the first link, the root cause of it all.
Yeah.
So breaking free requires understanding this chain and seeing where we can intervene, I guess.
Exactly. By understanding the links in this chain of dependent origination, we can start to identify the points where we can break free, where our skillful actions can disrupt the cycle and get a different outcome.
And the source connects this directly back to the Four Noble Truths, right?
Yeah.
The Buddha's core teachings about suffering and its cause and the possibility of ending it, and then the path to do so. So it seems like they provide like a roadmap for navigating
This whole
karmic landscape.
The Four Noble Truths are not just abstract concepts.
Right.
They're a practical framework for addressing the root cause of unskillful karma, which is suffering itself.
Okay.
So by understanding the nature of suffering, its causes, and the possibility of cessation, we can begin to dismantle that chain of dependent origination.
So it's not just about avoiding negative actions, but about addressing the underlying conditions that give rise to them.
Precisely. It's a much more holistic approach. Recognizes the interconnectedness of all things.
And the source tells this amazing story about the Buddha's own awakening, which it says serves as the ultimate proof that karma can end. Can you tell us more about that?
Absolutely. So the Buddha's awakening is the most powerful testament to the possibility of liberation from suffering. The source describes this moment as all experience growing cold as old karma runs its course.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's pretty powerful imagery.
Yeah.
So it's like reaching a state of perfect balance where the karmic scales finally come to rest. But how does this relate to us? Like, why should we care about ending karma in our everyday lives? Why is that important?
Well, while complete liberation might seem like a very distant goal, understanding karma empowers us to make more skillful choices right now.
Okay.
Even small shifts in intention can create ripple effects, leading to greater happiness and freedom in the present moment.
So it's not about waiting for some future enlightenment, but about using this knowledge to improve our lives today.
Exactly. And it highlights the practical relevance of the Buddhist teachings. They offer a path to greater well-being, regardless of our spiritual aspirations.
Okay, so we've established that those classic narratives about karma might not be the whole picture.
Right.
But I have to say, it's kind of hard to let go of those familiar ideas. They're very compelling.
Right.
And the source talks about how the Buddha himself had to abandon certain ways of thinking to fully grasp the end of karma. Can you explain that?
Yeah. So it's about letting go of the tendency to get caught up in stories, whether it's about past lives, cosmic justice, or even our own personal narratives.
Right.
These stories, while they can be very tempting, can actually distract us from the direct experience of the present moment.
So it's like trying to understand the ocean by just reading a book about it.
Yeah, yeah.
You know, you can learn a lot, but it's not the same as actually feeling the waves crashing against you.
Exactly. To truly understand the end of karma, we need to dive into the ocean of our own experience.
Okay.
And that's where this phenomenological approach comes in.
Okay, I'm starting to see how this ties together.
Yeah.
But I'm also curious about, how this fourth type of karma, this path to liberation, plays out in our everyday lives. Like, what does it look like to actually cultivate skillful karma?
So it starts with mindfulness.
Okay.
With paying attention to our intentions before we act, recognizing the motivations behind our thoughts, words, and deeds. It's about creating space for wise consideration before we react.
So it's not about becoming some kind of like saint overnight, but about just making conscious choices.
Yeah.
Being more deliberate in our actions.
Exactly. It's about bringing awareness to every aspect of our lives. And the source emphasizes that this is a gradual process. It takes time, patience, and persistent effort.
Kind of like training for a marathon.
Right.
You don't just wake up one day and run 26 miles. It takes consistent training and dedication.
That's a great analogy. And just as with marathon training, there will be challenges, setbacks, and moments of doubt. But the key is to keep going.
Right.
To trust in the process and the transformative power of skillful action.
This is all incredibly insightful, but the source also mentions something that kind of blew my mind, which is that even our sensory experiences, the way we perceive the world around us, are shaped by karma.
Yeah.
Can Can you shed some light on that?
Yeah, this is a profound insight that highlights the pervasive influence of karma.
Mm-hmm.
The Buddha taught that everything we experience, even the seemingly objective world around us, is filtered through the lens of our own actions. Our perceptions are colored by our karmic conditioning.
So it's like we're all wearing karma-tinted glasses that shape how we see the world.
In a way, yes. But the good news is that we can learn to clean those glasses, so to speak, to refine our perceptions through skillful action.
So it's not just about affecting future experiences, but also transforming our present perception of reality.
Precisely. By purifying our intentions and actions, we gradually purify our perceptions as well. We start to see the world with greater clarity and wisdom.
Wow. That's pretty inspiring. It suggests that even our most fundamental experience of reality is not fixed but valuable, subject to change through skillful karma.
Exactly. And it underscores the transformative potential of the path that the Buddha laid out.
This brings us to another concept that's mentioned in the source, unbinding.
Right.
The ultimate cessation of karma. And it sounds like a state of complete liberation beyond the cycle of birth and death. Can you tell us more about what that means?
Yeah. So this is a very challenging concept to grasp because it transcends our ordinary experience of reality. But the source describes it as a state of perfect peace. Free from all suffering and attachment. It's the ultimate goal of the Buddhist path.
It sounds almost unimaginable, like a state of just pure bliss.
Yeah, it's often described in those terms. But it's important to remember that language is limited when it comes to describing such a profound experience. The Buddha himself used various metaphors and analogies to try to convey a sense of what unbinding entails. But ultimately, it's something that can only be realized through direct experience.
So it's like trying to explain the taste of chocolate to someone who's never tasted it before.
Right.
Words can only go so far.
Exactly.
But the source also provides some clues about how unbinding manifests in the world. For example, it mentions that the Buddha, upon achieving enlightenment, saw that all phenomena are impermanent, subject to constant change. He also realized that there is no separate self, no enduring entity that experiences the world. So unbinding involves a fundamental shift in perspective, a radical change in how we perceive ourselves and the world around us.
Absolutely. Yeah. It's about letting go of all our attachments, our clinging to ideas of self and permanence, and recognizing the interconnected nature of reality.
Okay, now I know that the source emphasizes that the path to unbind is not easy. It requires tremendous effort, discipline, and dedication. But I'm curious about, the rewards along the way. Are there benefits to cultivating skillful karma, even if we don't achieve, full enlightenment?
Absolutely. So the source is very clear that even small steps on the path can bring greater peace, happiness, and freedom in our daily lives. As we cultivate mindfulness and skillful intentions, we naturally become more kind, compassionate, and understanding. We create more harmonious relationships with ourselves and others.
So it's not just about some distant future goal, but about improving the quality of our lives right here, right now.
Precisely. And that's what makes the Buddha's teachings so relevant and practical. They offer a path to greater well-being, regardless of our spiritual aspirations.
I'm starting to get a sense of the transformative power of skillful karma. But what about those who might be skeptical? What would you say to someone who doubts the existence of karma or the possibility of its end? What would you say to those folks?
I'd first acknowledge that skepticism is a healthy part of any intellectual inquiry. The Buddha himself encouraged his followers to question everything, to not blindly accept his teachings. But I'd also point out that karma is not a matter of blind faith. It's a principle that can be observed and tested in our own lives.
So it's like a scientific experiment. We can try out the principles of skillful action and see the results for ourselves.
Exactly. The Buddha presented his teachings as a set of hypotheses to be investigated and verified through personal experience. And millions of people over the centuries have attested to the transformative power of these teachings.
That's a compelling argument. It suggests that the proof is in the pudding, so to speak. We can experience the truth of karma through our own actions and intentions.
That's the beauty of the Buddha's teachings. They're not based on dogma or blind faith, but on direct experience and observation.
This is all incredibly insightful, but I'm also curious about how we can apply these teachings
Yeah.
to our modern lives. Like, the world today is full of, complexity and challenges. So how does the concept of karma help us navigate these kind of turbulent times?
Yeah, that's a great question. So the teachings on karma offer a timeless wisdom that can be applied to any situation, regardless of the era.
Right.
In today's world, where we're constantly bombarded with information and stimuli,
Yeah.
the practice of mindfulness becomes even more crucial.
Okay.
It helps us to stay grounded,
Right.
to make wise choices, and to cultivate a sense of inner peace amongst the chaos.
So in a way, karma provides like a framework for ethical decision-making
Yeah,
in a world where ethical guidelines can often seem blurred.
exactly. It reminds us that our actions have consequences,
Right.
not just for ourselves, but for others as well.
Okay.
It encourages us to act with compassion, understanding, and a sense of responsibility.
This has been incredibly illuminating, but you know me, I love a good story.
Right.
And the source mentions a particularly poignant teaching where the Buddha compares the tears
Yeah.
we've shed over countless lifetimes to the water in the four great oceans. Can you tell us more about that?
Yeah. So it's a very powerful teaching
Yeah.
that highlights the immensity of suffering we experience due to our own unskillful actions.
Okay.
The Buddha's point is that we've been trapped in this cycle of birth and death
Right.
for far too long,
Yeah.
and it's time to wake up and seek liberation.
Wow, that's a pretty sobering image. It really puts our everyday struggles into a much larger perspective.
Yeah, exactly. It reminds us that we have a choice.
Yeah.
We can continue to perpetuate the cycle of suffering, or we can choose to break free.
And that's where the fourth type of karma, the path to liberation, comes in again, right?
Yes,
It's
yeah.
not just about reducing suffering, it's about ending it altogether.
Precisely.
The Buddhist teachings offer a path to complete freedom,
Yeah.
not just from the suffering of this life, but from all future suffering as well.
Right?
Now, the source mentions that the Buddhist teachings on karma were shaped not just by his insights into rebirth and the workings of the cosmos, but also by his own experience of unbinding,
Right.
the cessation of karma.
Mhm.
Can you elaborate on how that experience informed his teachings?
Yeah, so this is a crucial point that highlights the experiential basis of the Buddha's teachings.
Right.
So he wasn't just theorizing about karma.
Right.
He had directly experienced its cessation and the profound liberation that comes with it.
Okay.
And that experience gave his teachings an authority and authenticity
Okay.
that set them apart from the other philosophical schools of his time.
So it's like the difference between reading about a foreign country
Yeah,
and actually traveling there. You can have all the book knowledge in the world,
right.
but it's no substitute for the direct experience.
Exactly. The Buddha's teachings were grounded in his own profound realization
Right.
of the nature of reality.
Okay.
And that's what gives them such lasting power and relevance.
This is all incredibly illuminating, but I'm also curious about how the Buddha used different modes of discourse, such as narratives, cosmological explanations,
Right.
and phenomenological analysis to teach about karma. Can you shed some light on that?
So the Buddha was a master communicator
Yeah?
who tailored his teachings to the specific needs of his audience. He recognized that different people learn in different ways, so he used a variety of approaches to convey his message.
Okay.
Sometimes he used stories,
Right.
sometimes he used cosmological frameworks,
Yeah.
and sometimes he used more analytical, phenomenological language.
So he was like a master chef who could adapt his recipes to suit different palates.
That's a great analogy. The Buddha's goal was to help people understand the truth of karma and the path to liberation, and he used whatever means were most effective
Right.
in achieving that goal.
The source emphasizes the importance of conviction in the principle of karma as like a working hypothesis for those seeking liberation. Why is that conviction so crucial?
Conviction plays a vital role in the Buddhist path. It's not about blind faith. It's about a deep understanding
Okay.
and acceptance of the principle of karma as a fundamental law of the universe.
Okay.
And this conviction fuels our efforts, inspires us to practice diligently,
Right.
and sustains us through the inevitable challenges we encounter along the way.
So it's like the fuel that powers our spiritual journey.
Exactly. Without that conviction, we might give up easily or get sidetracked by doubts and distractions.
Right.
But when we truly understand and accept the principle of karma,
Yeah.
it becomes a guiding force that propels us towards liberation.
This makes a lot of sense, but the source all mentions that this conviction can deepen and evolve as we progress on the path. How does that happen?
As we practice mindfulness and cultivate skillful actions, we begin to see the fruits of those actions in our own lives.
Right.
We experience greater peace, happiness, and freedom.
Okay.
And that firsthand experience strengthens our conviction,
Right.
transforming it from a theoretical understanding into a lived reality.
So it's a virtuous cycle. The more we practice, the more we experience the benefits,
Exactly.
and the stronger our conviction becomes.
Yeah, it's a process of gradual awakening, a journey of self-discovery and transformation.
And this journey, as the source points out, involves both developing and abandoning.
Yeah.
Can you explain what that means in the context of karma and liberation?
Sure. So developing in this context refers to cultivating wholesome qualities,
Okay.
such as mindfulness, compassion, and wisdom.
Right.
It's about training our minds, refining our intentions, and acting skillfully in the world.
Okay.
Abandoning, on the other hand, refers to letting go of unwholesome qualities,
Right.
such as greed, hatred, and delusion.
Okay.
It's about uprooting the negative patterns that bind us to suffering.
So it's like weeding a garden. We need to nurture the flowers while removing the weeds.
That's a great analogy, and the source emphasizes that both developing and abandoning are essential aspects of the path.
Right.
We can't achieve liberation simply by cultivating good qualities.
Okay.
We also need to let go of the negative tendencies that hold us back.
This makes sense. It's about creating like a more balanced and harmonious in a landscape, like fertile ground for spiritual growth.
Exactly.
Now, the source mentions that some people might be drawn to mindfulness and other Buddhist practices for their psychological benefits, like stress reduction and emotional well-being.
Yeah.
But it also suggests that conviction in karma is essential for those seeking full liberation.
Right.
Why is that?
So while mindfulness and other Buddhist practices can certainly bring about significant psychological benefits,
Okay.
the ultimate goal of the Buddhist path is to transcend suffering altogether.
Right.
And that requires a deep understanding and acceptance of karma as the underlying mechanism that perpetuates the cycle of birth and death.
So it's like the difference between treating the symptoms and addressing the root cause.
Yeah.
Mindfulness can help us manage stress and cultivate emotional well-being.
Right.
But to truly break free from suffering, we need to address the underlying karmic patterns that create those challenges in the first place.
And that's where conviction in karma becomes so crucial. It provides the motivation and the framework for engaging in the deep inner work that leads to liberation.
This all makes sense. But I'm curious about, how we can develop and strengthen our conviction in karma. Are there any specific practices or approaches that can help?
So one of the most effective ways to develop conviction is through personal experience.
Okay.
As we practice mindfulness, we start to see the cause and effect relationship between our actions and their consequences. We notice how skillful actions lead to greater peace and well-being, while unskillful actions create suffering for ourselves and others.
So it's like conducting a personal experiment, observing the results of our own actions and intentions.
And as we accumulate more of these experiences, our conviction naturally deepens. It becomes less of a theoretical concept and more of a lived reality.
Okay. Now, the source mentions that the Buddha's teachings on karma were not intended to be like a rigid, deterministic system. He acknowledged that there are many factors that contribute to our experiences, including physical laws, environmental influences, and the actions of others.
Yeah.
So how does karma fit into this complex web of causality?
Yeah, so the Buddha's teachings on karma don't deny the existence of other causal factors.
Right.
He acknowledged that our lives are shaped by a multitude of influences.
Yeah.
But he emphasized that karma, our own intentional actions, plays a primary role in shaping our experiences, particularly our mental and emotional states.
So it's not about saying that karma is the only cause,
Right.
but that it's a significant and influential factor.
Precisely.
Okay.
And the source points out that understanding karma doesn't negate the importance of taking responsibility for our actions in the present moment.
That's a crucial point. It's not about, like, fatalistically accepting whatever happens as our karmic destiny.
No.
It's about recognizing that we have the power to choose our actions and intentions wisely. Exactly. Even in the face of challenging circumstances.
And that's what makes the Buddha's teachings so empowering.
Okay.
They offer a path to greater freedom and well-being.
Right.
Not just in some future lifetime, but in the here and now.
This has been an incredibly insightful dive into the intricacies of karma.
Yeah.
But before we wrap up, I want to touch on one final point that the source raises, which is the limitations of language when it comes to describing ultimate reality. Can you elaborate on that?
Yeah. So
Yeah.
the Buddha recognized that language is a tool, a means of communication, but it's ultimately limited in its ability to grasp the vastness and complexity of reality,
Right.
especially when it comes to describing profound spiritual experiences,
Right,
like
right.
unbinding.
Like unbinding, yeah.
He often used metaphors, similes, and analogies to convey
Right.
a sense of what these experiences entail. But he also cautioned against mistaking the finger for the moon,
Yeah, I love that.
so to speak.
Right. It's like trying to describe the taste of a strawberry to someone who's never tasted one before.
Right. Right.
Words can only go so far.
Exactly.
And the source reminds us that the ultimate goal is to transcend language altogether and experience the truth of karma directly through our own mindful actions and intentions.
Exactly.
So it's not about getting bogged down in philosophical debates, but about putting the teachings into practice and seeing the results for ourselves.
Precisely.
Okay.
The Buddha's teachings are not meant to be a set of beliefs to be accepted on faith, but a path to be walked and a truth to be realized through personal experience.
This is a really profound point. It suggests that the true understanding of karma lies not in intellectual analysis, but in lived experience, in the transformative power of mindful action.
Exactly. The Buddha's teachings invite us to become active participants in our own awakening, not passive recipients of dogma or belief.
This has been an incredibly enriching exploration of karma, but before we wrap up, I'd love to hear your final thoughts on this profound concept.
Well, I think the most important takeaway from our deep dive into karma is that it's not a fixed fate or a predetermined destiny.
Right.
It's a dynamic process that we can influence and transform through our own choices and actions. And that recognition is incredibly empowering. It reminds us that we have the ability to create a more positive and fulfilling future, both for ourselves and for the world around us.
That's a beautiful and inspiring message. It reminds us that we're not just passive recipients of karma, but active agents of change. So if we want to create a better future, we need to start by understanding how our present actions shape that future.
Exactly. It all comes back to intention, to making conscious choices that align with our values and aspirations.
And that brings us back to the fourth kind of karma, the karma that leads to the end of karma. Can you remind us what that looks like in practice?
It's about cultivating a different way of being in the world.
Okay.
It's about acting from a place of wisdom and compassion, rather than greed, aversion, and delusion. It's about recognizing the interconnectedness of all things and understanding that our actions have consequences, not just for ourselves, but for all beings.
So it's not about becoming some kind of perfect saint, but about making a conscious effort to live in a way that benefits ourselves and others.
Exactly. It's about recognizing that even small acts of kindness and compassion can have a ripple effect, creating a more positive and harmonious world.
This deep dive has been incredibly insightful, expert speaker. You've helped us understand karma not as some rigid cosmic law, but as a dynamic process that we can influence and transform through our own choices and actions.
It's been my pleasure. I'm always inspired by the wisdom and practicality of the Buddha's teachings.
And to you listening, you hope this deep dive has given you a new understanding of karma and its potential to shape your life. As you go about your day, we encourage you to reflect on your own intentions and actions. How can you cultivate more mindfulness and skillful karma in your own life? How can you use this understanding to create a more positive and fulfilling future for yourself and for all beings? The journey to liberation starts with a single step, a single act of awareness, a single choice to act with wisdom and compassion.
May your path be filled with peace and understanding. Yeah. The Buddha's teachings are not meant to be a set of beliefs to be accepted on faith, but a path to be walked and a truth to be realized through personal experience.
This is a really profound point. It suggests that the true understanding of karma lies not in intellectual analysis, but in lived experience, in the transformative power of mindful action.
Exactly. The Buddha's teachings invite us to become active participants in our own awakening, not passive recipients of dogma or belief.
This has been an absolutely fascinating deep dive into karma, but before we wrap things up, I want to circle back to something that really struck me in the source material. It mentions that even our sensory experiences, the way we perceive the world around us, are shaped by karma. Can you talk a little bit more about that?
Right. That's a key point that often gets overlooked in discussions about karma.
Yeah.
It suggests that our experience of reality isn't objective, but rather it's filtered through this lens of our past actions and intentions. Our karmic conditioning influences how we see the world, how we interpret events, and even how we experience physical sensations.
It's like we're each wearing a pair of like comma-tinted glasses that color everything we see.
That's a great analogy.
Yeah.
And it highlights the importance of recognizing those filters and understanding how they shape our perceptions. The good news is that through mindfulness and skillful action, we can start to polish those lenses, so to speak, and see the world with greater clarity and wisdom.
So it's not just about creating a better future, but also about experiencing the present moment with more awareness and understanding.
Exactly. By understanding karma, we can start to see the connections between our past actions, our present experiences, and our future possibilities. It gives us a framework for making wiser choices, cultivating more wholesome qualities, and ultimately creating a more positive and fulfilling life.
And that brings us back full circle to the fourth type of karma, the karma that leads to the end of karma. Can you remind us what that entails and how we can start cultivating it in our own lives?
Absolutely. As we've discussed, the fourth karma is the path to liberation from the cycle of suffering. It's about purifying our intentions, acting with wisdom and compassion, and ultimately transcending the limitations of our karmic conditioning. It's not a quick fix, but rather a gradual process of awakening.
So it's not about simply avoiding bad actions, but about actively cultivating wholesome qualities.
Precisely. It's about shifting our focus from self-centered desires to a more expansive sense of interconnectedness. It's about recognizing that our actions have consequences, not just for ourselves, but for all beings.
And that recognition, as you've pointed out, can be a powerful motivator for change.
Absolutely. When we truly understand the nature of karma, we realize that we're not just passive victims of fate, but active participants in creating our own reality. And that realization can be incredibly liberating.
This deep dive has been incredibly eye-opening. You've given me a much deeper appreciation for the complexity and nuance of karma.
It's been my pleasure. It's always a joy to explore these profound teachings.
And to you listening, we hope this deep dive has given you a new understanding of karma and its potential to shape your life. As you go about your day, we encourage you to reflect on your own intentions and actions. How can you cultivate more mindfulness and skillful karma in your own life? How can you use this understanding to create a more positive and fulfilling future for yourself and for all beings? Remember, every choice we make, every action we take is an opportunity to create a ripple effect that extends far beyond ourselves. The journey to liberation starts with a single step, a single act of awareness, a single choice to act with wisdom and compassion.
May your path be filled with peace and understanding.
Welcome back, everybody, for another deep dive.
Yes.
This time we're going to be looking at a concept that comes from Buddhist thought that might surprise you a little bit. And that's skillfulness. We're going to be going beyond just being good or being a good person. And really going to be diving into how the Buddha viewed action and intention in kind of a whole new way. Our source material for this deep dive is a section called The Wings to Awakening. And this is from a larger Buddhist text called Pasted Text.
Got it.
And we're going to see how, through this text, we can look at action and intention as kind of the mechanics of how our minds shape our reality.
Yeah, what's really interesting is that the Buddha approached this topic of skillfulness a little bit differently than everybody else who was around at the time. He wasn't really caught up in abstract theories about, like, the universe or anything like that. His focus was much more on what we do.
I've always found that focus on action in Buddhism to be really refreshing. So what was the prevailing thought at the time that he was pushing back against?
Well, imagine you're in ancient India. You're surrounded by intellectuals. And there are these two main camps of thought. One group of people believed that the universe was completely deterministic. Meaning that everything was fated. The other camp insisted that everything was random. Pure chaos.
So it's kind of like a cosmic debate between destiny and chance.
Exactly.
How does skillfulness fit into all this, though?
Well, that's where it gets really interesting. The Buddha noticed that even the people who believed in a predetermined universe or a chaotic one, they still acted with purpose. They still, debated. They still had goals. They still tried to convince each other of things. So their actions, in a way, contradicted their own beliefs.
So he saw this disconnection and was like, wait a minute. If skill didn't matter, why are you even bothering?
Exactly. He recognized that, Humans are inherently driven to try to improve.
Right, to master things.
The master things. We see it everywhere.
Right.
Like,
yeah, it's everywhere.
Learning a new language or perfecting a recipe.
Right.
That drive is at the heart of skillfulness.
And I think that really resonates with a lot of us.
Yeah.
Just the idea of wanting to get better at something, of honing our skills.
Yeah.
I think we all kind of know deep down that our actions can shape outcomes.
Yeah, and that's like the foundation of the Buddha's entire teaching.
Wow.
The very idea that we could become scared at something,
Okay.
it has huge implications.
What are some of those implications?
Well, first of all, it means that actions have real consequences.
Okay.
If everything was just preordained or random,
Right.
why bother trying to improve?
Right. You're just along for the ride at that point.
Exactly. Skill wouldn't even matter.
Right. It'd be like saying practice is pointless.
Yeah.
Which just doesn't line up with human experience.
Totally.
So what
But the second implication is that some results are better than others.
Okay.
We strive for improvement because we value certain outcomes over others.
Like we're not just passively floating along. We're aiming for something.
Exactly.
With a directionality to our actions.
And the third implication is that we can learn from our mistakes.
Okay.
Like our actions aren't totally set in stone. There's room to adjust and refine and grow.
Right.
That's the beauty of skill development.
So that kind of flips the script on that whole fate versus chance debate.
It does.
The Buddha is essentially saying that we have agency.
Exactly. We have the power to shape our life.
Okay.
But that power requires cultivation.
Okay.
And the key ingredient in cultivating skillfulness is attention.
Attention.
Yeah.
Now, that's a word we hear a lot these days.
It is.
And is obviously very important.
Yeah.
What did the Buddha say about how attention relates to this idea of skillfulness?
He taught that mastering any skill, whether it's playing an instrument or building a house, whatever it is, requires paying attention to three things.
Is it what we're doing, how we're doing it, and what happens as a result?
First, it's about understanding the pre-existing conditions or the situation at hand.
Okay.
Like what's the context? What factors are already in play?
Kind of like a builder surveying the land before they start construction.
Exactly. The second thing is paying attention to our own actions.
Okay.
Like what are we actually doing in response to the situation?
So it's not enough to just understand the situation.
Yeah.
We also have to be mindful of how we're choosing to respond.
Yeah.
What's the third thing?
The third thing is we need to pay attention to the results.
Okay.
What happened because of what we did?
Okay.
Did our actions lead to the outcome that we desired?
So it sounds like he's describing this constant feedback loop.
Yeah.
Where you assess the situation, take action, see the results.
Exactly.
And then use that information to adjust your approach.
Exactly. And this constant cycle of attention and adjustment is how we refine any skill. And it's fascinating how this applies not just to practical skills, but also to the path of enlightenment itself.
Now, this is where it gets really interesting to me.
Yeah.
How did the Buddha apply these principles of skillfulness to the bigger picture?
Yeah.
To the quest for liberation?
He saw the Four Noble Truths, which are the foundation of his teachings, as the most skillful way to view all experience.
So can you remind me what the Four Noble Truths are? Because I need a little refresher sometimes.
In essence, they are
the
truth of suffering,
the
truth of the cause of suffering, the truth of the end of suffering, and the truth of the path to the end of suffering.
So it's acknowledging that suffering exists, understanding where it comes from, knowing that freedom from suffering is possible, and then having a way to get there.
Exactly.
Okay.
And the Buddha outlined specific qualities and practices to cultivate on that path, all rooted in skillful action.
Okay.
One of the most important is right intention or right resolve.
So not just good intentions, but intentions that are wise and lead towards liberation.
Exactly. It's aligning our motivations with wisdom and compassion, making sure our actions are truly beneficial.
That makes a lot of sense.
Yeah.
What other practices kind of fall under this umbrella of skillful action?
Another key practice is right concentration, which is about refining our feelings and perceptions through meditation.
So it's kind of like a musician practicing scales to master their instrument.
That's a great analogy.
They're training their attention. They're refining their technique.
Exactly. By training our attention, we can calm and steady the mind, leading to deeper insights into the nature of reality.
So all of this feels very practical and applicable.
It is.
We're not just talking about abstract philosophy.
It's a set of skills.
Yeah, it's a set of skills that can be developed.
Yeah, and things get even more intriguing when we look at the concept of non-fashioning.
Non-fashioning?
Yeah, the text describes it as a point where skillful action leads to a natural disengagement from the cycle of suffering.
So skillful action eventually leads to a state beyond action.
It does.
That sounds paradoxical.
It does, doesn't it?
Yeah.
But think about it this way.
Okay.
The more skilled we become at something, the less effort is required.
Okay.
Our actions become more spontaneous,
Okay.
more in harmony with the natural flow of things.
Okay, I think I'm starting to grasp it a little bit.
Yeah.
But how does non-fashioning actually come about?
Well, it's described as a state of liberation.
Okay.
Where the mind is free from the constraints that cause suffering.
Okay.
The difficult concept to grasp.
Yeah, I can imagine.
Yeah.
So how did the Buddha communicate all these ideas?
Yeah.
I mean, did he just capture people on the skillfulness, or how did he get these ideas across?
Not at all.
Okay.
He's a master storyteller.
Okay.
And the text mentions how he often used metaphors.
Okay.
From craftsmanship, art, athletics, to illustrate his points.
To make them relatable.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Make these profound ideas relatable to people.
So instead of just talking at people, he was meeting them where they were at.
Yeah.
Using
imagery.
Familiar imagery.
Yes.
To get these profound truths across.
And here's a fascinating fact.
Okay.
A lot of medication texts from that time actually use terms that are borrowed from ancient Indian music theory.
Really?
Yeah, so they'll talk about training the mind, picking up a theme, finding the right pitch of effort.
That's so cool.
Yeah.
So it really emphasizes that
Yeah.
practical experiential nature
does.
of the Buddha's teachings.
Yeah.
It's not just about thinking about these concepts, but
Right.
actually feeling them.
Yeah, living them.
Living them, yeah.
He was inviting people to become virtuoso performers.
I love that.
Yeah.
In the symphony of existence.
Yes.
So we've laid this groundwork
I have.
of understanding skillfulness as the foundation of the Buddhist path.
Yeah.
But let's get a little bit more practical.
Okay.
What specific takeaways from the text can we apply in our own lives?
That's a great question. The text delves into
Okay.
how to differentiate between good intentions and skillful ones.
Okay.
Explores the roots of good and evil actions.
Okay.
And even highlights the power of confession and making amends.
This is getting really interesting. I can't wait to explore those points further.
Yeah.
But for now, let's pause here
Okay.
and pick up the conversation in part 2
Sounds good.
of this deep dive. Welcome back. Before the break, we were about to unpack some of the practical takeaways from the Wings to Awakening.
Yeah.
I'm so eager to hear how this ancient wisdom can be applied to our lives today.
Yeah, there's so much to explore.
Yeah.
One key takeaway
Okay.
is the importance of distinguishing between good intentions
Okay.
and truly skillful ones.
Okay.
The text really emphasizes that even well-meaning actions can be unhelpful if they lack wisdom and insight.
So it's not enough to just have a good heart.
Right.
You know, like there's more to it than just wanting to do the right thing.
Exactly. Sometimes even the best of intentions can be clouded by ignorance.
Okay.
We might act impulsively or fail to grasp,
Yeah.
the full consequences of our choices.
Can you give me an example?
Sure.
I'm a big fan of concrete examples.
Of course.
To help me understand.
Let's say you have a friend
Okay.
who's struggling financially.
Okay.
And you want to help them.
Okay.
Right? Your intention is good.
Uh-huh.
You genuinely want to alleviate their suffering.
Right.
But what if you lend them a large sum of money
Okay.
without really understanding the root cause of their financial troubles?
So what if they're struggling with like a gambling addiction or something?
Exactly.
Or have some other issue that's contributing to their financial woes?
Right. In that case,
Yeah.
your good intentions might actually enable their harmful behavior.
Yeah. You might be making the problem worse.
Exactly.
In the long run.
Skillful action requires us not only compassion, but also a deep understanding of cause and effect.
Right.
It's about seeing the bigger picture.
This is making me think about times when maybe I acted with good intentions, but maybe not with the fullest understanding of a situation.
Right.
It's a good reminder to pause and reflect.
It is.
Before jumping into action.
Yeah, the text also offers a thought-provoking perspective on the roots of both good and evil actions.
Now that sounds intriguing.
Yeah.
What did the Buddha have to say about that?
Well, he didn't view people as inherently good or bad.
Okay.
He said that people act in harmful ways due to unskillful thinking.
Okay.
And conversely, when they cultivate skillful thinking, positive actions kind of arise naturally.
So it's all about the quality of our minds.
It is.
The way we perceive and interpret the world.
Yes. And since thinking is a skill that can be developed, this opens up the possibility of transformation. We can actively cultivate more skillful ways of thinking. And as a result, live more ethically.
There's something very hopeful about that idea.
Yeah.
Because it means that even if we've made mistakes in the past, we can learn from them.
Exactly.
And make different choices going forward.
Yes, the text highlights the power of confession and making amends as part of this process of growth. There's a story about King Ajatasattu who committed a terrible act. He killed his own father to secure his position on the throne.
That's intense.
Yeah.
So what happened when he confessed his actions to the Buddha?
Well, the Buddha didn't condemn him. He acknowledged the severity of his actions, but also emphasized that it's always possible to make a fresh start. He encouraged the king to learn from his mistake and dedicate himself to living a more skillful life.
So the Buddha wasn't focused on punishment or judgment or anything. He was really prioritizing rehabilitation and growth.
Exactly. It seems like confession in this context is less about dwelling in guilt and more about taking responsibility and moving forward.
Using it as a catalyst for change.
Exactly. The text also provides guidance on how to cultivate that skillful mind in the first place. And it emphasizes both internal and external factors.
Internal and external factors. Tell me more.
Internally, it's about developing what's called appropriate attention.
So that sounds like a mental skill. How would you describe appropriate attention?
It's the ability to observe our thoughts objectively. Without judgment or getting swept away by them. We can ask ourselves, is this thought helpful? What might happen if I act on it?
So it's kind of like becoming a curious observer of our own minds.
Exactly.
Noticing our thoughts and emotions without getting
totally entangled.
Entangle in them.
As we cultivate this appropriate attention, we start to see the world through a clearer lens. We can apply the wisdom of the Four Noble Truths. Recognizing the truth of suffering. And the possibility of liberation.
That makes sense. What about the external factors that you mentioned? How do those come into play?
The text emphasizes the importance of friendship with admirable people. So it's about surrounding ourselves with those who embody wisdom, compassion, ethical conduct.
I've heard that saying. You're the average of the 5 people you spend the most time with.
Exactly.
It sounds like the Buddha was saying something similar. He was encouraging us to seek out those positive influences.
But it goes even deeper than that. It's not just about who we spend time with, but about actively seeking guidance and inspiration from those who are further along on the path of skillful living.
So it's about being intentional with who we learn from.
Exactly.
Who we look up to. And whose examples we try to emulate.
Their wisdom and actions can be a powerful mirror, reflecting back to us our own potential for skillful living. And the internal and external factors actually work together as we cultivate more skillful attitudes and behaviors, we'll naturally be drawn to more admirable people who in turn support our continued growth.
It's like a positive feedback loop.
It is.
Where skillfulness attracts skillfulness. Is there anything else that the text highlights when it comes to developing this skillful way of life?
There's a really interesting section about discerning truth. The text tells the story of the Buddha's encounter with the Kalamas. This was a group of people who were really confused by the conflicting teachings of various spiritual teachers.
I think I've heard of this story.
You have.
Isn't that where the Buddha encourages people to think critically and not blindly follow tradition or authority?
It is. Yes, it's often cited as the Buddha's endorsement of free inquiry. But there's a nuance that the text points out. While the Buddha encouraged critical thinking, he also emphasized the importance of considering the wisdom of those who have experience and insight.
So it's not a complete rejection of all external guidance?
No, it's about finding that balance between independent thinking and learning from those who have walked the path before us.
We need both.
We do.
Our own inner compass. And the guidance of wise mentors.
It's a delicate balance.
It is.
And the text reminds us to approach both with discernment.
This whole conversation is really making me reflect on my own approach to learning and decision-making. It's inspiring me to think more critically, be more aware of my intentions, and to seek out wise guidance in my life.
That's great.
This is fantastic. But we've covered so much ground today. Should we pause here again?
I think that's a good idea.
before moving on to the final part
Yeah.
of this deep dive.
There's still so much to uncover in
Yeah.
the Wings to Awakening.
Yeah.
And I'm eager to share more insights with you.
Welcome back to the final part of our deep dive into skillfulness.
Yeah.
We've covered so much ground already.
We have.
Everything from the historical context of the Buddha's teachings
Yeah.
to these really practical tips for cultivating a skillful mind.
Right.
I'm finding this whole concept incredibly relevant to my life.
Yeah.
Especially in today's world.
Me too. The Wings to Awakening really offers this timeless wisdom,
It does.
that I think can help us navigate the complexities of modern life with more grace and intention.
Before we wrap up,
Yeah.
I'd love to revisit some of the key points that we've talked about
Okay.
and see how we can apply them to our own experiences.
Yeah.
What stands out to you as the most impactful takeaway?
I think for me, it's the idea that the Buddha saw his entire path as a meta skill,
Okay.
a skill of developing skillful qualities.
Okay.
It's like he was saying that enlightenment
Okay.
isn't reserved for a select few, but is a set of skills anyone can cultivate
Right.
through dedicated practice.
That's so empowering. It's not about being inherently special
Right.
or having some mystical experience. It's
Yeah.
really about
Yeah.
actively training our minds,
Yeah.
refining our actions.
Exactly. And he really emphasized
Yeah.
that this process of skill development is an ongoing journey.
Right. It's not like a destination you arrive at.
No, it's a
either.
process.
Yeah, it's a process.
Of constant refining, refining our actions, refining our intentions, refining even our awareness itself.
Right. And we talked about how crucial attention is in this
Yes.
process.
Yes.
It's about learning to observe ourselves and the world around us with more clarity and more objectivity.
It takes practice.
It does. It's not easy.
The text offers some practical tips for cultivating what it calls appropriate attention.
Right.
Remember that idea of pausing before, during, and after our actions?
Yeah.
To reflect on what we're doing and why we're doing it.
Yeah. It's like taking those mini mindfulness breaks
Exactly.
throughout the day to just check in with ourselves.
Yes.
You
And
know?
we can ask ourselves.
And ask ourselves.
Is this action skillful?
Right.
What's motivating me right now? Am I acting from wisdom and compassion?
Yeah.
Or am I being driven by something less skillful?
It's about becoming more aware of our motivations.
It is.
And the potential consequences of our actions.
Yes.
No matter how big or small they are.
It's a way of bringing more consciousness to our everyday lives.
The text also highlighted the importance of our relationship.
It did.
Of surrounding ourselves with people who embody those skillful qualities that we want to develop.
Yeah, having those positive role models can make a huge difference.
It can, and we talked about how it's not just about spending time with good people,
Right.
but about actively seeking guidance and inspiration from people who are further along on the path.
Who've walked the walk.
Yeah, it's being intentional with who we learn from.
Yes.
It makes me think about the mentors that I've had in my life and how much I've learned from them.
Yeah.
Their examples have helped me to see what's possible and inspired me to keep growing.
But even with wise guidance, discernment is still crucial.
It is.
Remember what the Buddha told the Kalamas.
Yes.
Don't blindly follow tradition or authority.
Right.
Test things for yourself.
Yes.
Yeah.
It's finding that balance between being open to learning from others and cultivating our own critical thinking skills.
We need both.
We do.
Yeah.
And speaking of learning from our experiences, the story of King Ajatasattu
Oh, yeah.
was such a powerful reminder that it's never too late
It's never too late.
to turn towards a more skillful path,
No.
even if we've made significant mistakes in the past.
That story really stuck with me, too.
Me too.
It's so easy to get caught up in guilt and self-recrimination.
Yeah.
But the Buddha's message was one of
Compassion.
compassion and possibility.
And possibility.
We can always choose to learn from our mistakes and move forward.
Yeah. We're not defined by our past actions.
No.
We can always choose a different path.
This whole conversation has been so illuminating for me.
Me too. I'm walking away
Yeah.
with a renewed sense of agency
Good.
and a deeper understanding of how I can apply these principles of skillfulness
Yeah.
to my own life.
That's wonderful to hear. This concept of skillfulness
Yeah.
really invites us to approach life as this continuous journey of learning and refining and growing.
Yeah.
And it's a path that's open to all of us,
I love that.
regardless of our background or experience.
It's such a hopeful
Yeah.
and empowering message.
It is.
So as we wrap up this deep dive, I
Yeah.
want to leave our listeners with a question to ponder.
Okay.
What area of your life
Yeah.
could you approach with more skillfulness? Maybe it's your work or your relationships, or even just the way you manage your own thoughts and emotions.
Yeah.
The invitation is there
It is.
to bring these ancient teachings into your present moment and see how they can enhance your experience.
That's a perfect ending.
Yeah.
Thanks for joining us on this exploration of skillfulness.
It's been a pleasure.
May you cultivate wisdom, compassion, and skillful action
Yes.
in all areas of your life. Welcome back, everyone, for another deep dive with us.
It's great to be back.
Today, we're going to be looking at some of the most essential teachings, I guess we could say, in Buddhist thought.
Yeah.
And these are known as the wings to awakening.
Yeah.
And these are kind of like, I guess you could say, the Buddha's greatest hits.
Yeah, yeah.
The ones he specifically highlighted, I guess, towards the end of his life as the most crucial for his message to endure.
Absolutely. And I think what makes this deep dive so interesting is we're looking at an introduction to the Wings to Awakening from dhammatalks.org. And so it's not just like a random collection of teachings. It's actually a very specifically curated selection of lists to guide us to a very specific understanding.
Okay, so before we jump into all the complexities of this, I think it would be helpful to set the stage a bit.
Yeah.
I'm really curious what led the Buddha, or I guess Siddhartha, as he was known before enlightenment, on this path in the first place?
Well, imagine this. You're a prince living a life of absolute luxury. Palaces for every season, servants catering to your every whim, the finest silks, the most delicious food, anything you could want, you have it.
Sounds more like a fairy tale than the beginning of a spiritual quest.
Right, but that was Siddhartha's reality, and in fact, our source even mentions that he had lotus ponds filled with fragrant blossoms,
Wow.
sandalwood from Varanasi specifically for his use, and even a white sunshade held over him day and night to protect him from the elements.
Oh my gosh, talk about sheltered. I can't even imagine.
Aw.
So something tells me this isn't just a story about how to become a spoiled prince.
Right?
What happened?
Well, here's where things get really interesting. Despite all of this extravagance that surrounded Siddhartha, he had a profound realization. He encountered the realities of aging, sickness, and death.
Yeah, I guess, those are the ultimate equalizers, huh? No matter how much wealth you have,
Absolutely.
it can't really protect you from the realities of being human.
Right.
So what was it about these encounters that kind of shook him so much?
Well, for Siddhartha, these weren't just philosophical musings.
Okay.
These are visceral, emotional experiences that really shook him to his core.
Oh, wow.
And so it really shattered his illusion of happiness. He realized that the happiness that he had known, the happiness that was based on these external circumstances, was ultimately fleeting, unreliable.
So this wasn't just a sudden intellectual awakening. It was really a deeply personal confrontation with the fragility of life.
Absolutely.
So that's what set him on his search for something deeper, something more lasting.
That's right.
What was he looking for?
He was searching for a happiness that transcended the limitations of the physical world.
Okay.
A happiness that wouldn't fade with age, with illness, or even his death.
Yeah.
A state that our source calls amata Dhamma, or deathlessness.
Deathlessness. Okay, that's a pretty bold concept.
It is.
I mean, isn't death just an inevitable part of life?
Well, that's what Siddhartha set out to investigate.
Okay.
And his journey took place during a really fascinating period in Indian history, the 6th century BCE.
Oh, yeah, that was a time of major societal change and intellectual ferment, right?
Absolutely. You had the ancient Vedic traditions with their emphasis on rituals and sacrifices, and then you had this emergence of a new wave of thinkers called the Samas, who were really challenging the status quo.
So these samas were like the rebels of their time.
Yeah.
Questioning those traditional ways of thinking and searching for alternative paths to knowledge and liberation.
Exactly. And it was within this intellectual landscape that Siddhartha began his own quest for deathlessness.
This is all starting to feel like a pretty epic hero's journey. But I'm guessing the path to deathlessness wasn't exactly straightforward.
Right.
What were some of the roadblocks or the challenges that he encountered along the way?
One of the biggest challenges he faced was navigating the complex philosophical debates that were raging at the time.
Okay.
And there were two in particular that stand out as really important.
Okay, I'm all ears.
The first one was, what happens after we die?
Okay.
Is there an afterlife? And if so, what is it like? Is it something to strive for? Is it something to escape?
I can imagine that would be a pretty hot topic.
Right.
What were some of the different views on that?
Well, you had the traditional Vedic view, which emphasized reincarnation and the cycle of rebirth.
Okay.
But then you had groups like the Lokayatans, who were essentially materialists.
Okay.
They believed death was the end of existence, so you might as well enjoy yourself while you're alive.
YOLO, ancient India style?
Exactly. And then you had the Aidakas, who believed in a deterministic fate.
Okay.
That everything was predetermined, and so your actions didn't really matter.
Talk about a recipe for apathy.
Right.
So with all of these different views swirling around, how did Siddhartha approach this whole question of the afterlife?
Well, his enlightenment provided a completely unique perspective. It wasn't about blindly accepting any of the existing views, but rather it was about directly experiencing the nature of reality.
So he wasn't just theorizing about it. He was seeking a direct experience of what happens after death.
Exactly. And that brings us to the second major philosophical debate, the question of karma or causality.
Yes, the age-old question of how our actions influence our happiness and suffering,
Right.
both in this life and beyond.
Yeah.
What were the prevailing views on that at the time?
Well, you had groups like the Jains, who had a very linear, almost physical concept of karma.
Okay.
They saw it as a kind of cosmic balance sheet.
Okay.
Good deeds lead to good outcomes, bad deeds lead to bad outcomes.
Makes sense. That's a pretty intuitive way to understand it.
Right, and they believed that these actions created asavas,
What's that?
which were these sticky substances that clung to the soul and kept it trapped in this cycle of rebirth.
Oh, so it's like you got to avoid creating those in the first place.
That's right.
So how did they propose doing that?
Well, they advocated for nonviolence and even inaction to the point of a slow, deliberate death through starvation as a way to burn away these asavas and free the soul.
Wow, that's some serious commitment.
Yeah.
I'm sensing that Siddhartha's approach to karma might have been a little bit different.
Oh, absolutely. His enlightenment provided a much more nuanced and insightful understanding of this whole concept of karma. He saw karma not as some external force, but as the very process of action, result, and reaction itself.
So it's not about tallying up good deeds and bad deeds,
Mm-hmm.
but about understanding this dynamic interplay of causes and conditions
Right.
that shape our experience.
Exactly. And this understanding was really a game changer.
Okay.
Because it meant that we weren't simply puppets of fate,
Okay.
but active participants in shaping our own destinies.
That's a really empowering perspective.
It is.
So how did Siddhartha's enlightenment actually unfold? What were those key insights that he gained that led him to this revolutionary understanding?
Well, the texts describe his path to enlightenment and involving two fundamental types of knowledge.
Okay, lay it on me. What were they? Oh, so last time we left off with Siddhartha gaining these two, like, really profound types of knowledge on his path to enlightenment.
Right.
What were those?
Okay, so the first type of knowledge that the source describes is the knowledge of the regularity of the Dhamma.
Okay.
And basically it's about understanding the law of cause and effect, but not just intellectually, but really seeing how this principle operates in every aspect of our experience.
So it's like realizing that there's this kind of like hidden order to the universe, this cause and effect blueprint underlying everything that happens.
Exactly. And what the Beta realized is that by understanding this principle deeply, we can actually gain a degree of mastery over our experiences.
Wow.
We're not just helpless victims of circumstance.
Yeah.
We actually have the power to shape our own lives.
That's a pretty radical idea, especially considered all that talk about fate and determinism we were just talking about.
Absolutely. It really shifts the whole paradigm from one of resignation to one of empowerment.
Okay, so that's the first type of knowledge?
Mm-hmm.
What about the second?
Okay, the second one is even more profound.
Okay.
It is the knowledge of unbinding and nibbana.
Nibbana.
And this refers to the experience of complete liberation from suffering,
Okay.
from the cycle of birth and death, from all the limitations and anxieties that come with being caught in this web of cause and effect.
So if the first type of knowledge is kind of like understanding the rules of the game, the second one is like transcending the game altogether.
That's a great way to put it.
Okay.
And to describe nibbana, the Buddha used this image of a fire being extinguished.
Oh, okay.
So the fire represents all the clinging and craving and agitation that keep us trapped in suffering.
Okay.
And the extinguished fire symbolizes the peace and serenity and freedom that come with liberation.
That's such a vivid image.
Yeah.
But I have to ask, how did Siddhartha actually arrive at these two types of knowledge?
Right.
What was the process of his enlightenment like?
Well, the texts describe his path to enlightenment as involving three key insights.
Okay.
The first was the ability to remember past lives,
Okay.
to actually see the continuity of consciousness across different lifetimes.
So kind of like accessing those cosmic akashic records, seeing the whole tapestry of your soul's journey.
Exactly, and this allowed him to understand how actions from previous lives were creating conditions for his present experience.
Okay.
And it really highlighted the depth and the complexity of the karmic process.
Wow, that must have been mind-blowing.
Yeah.
What was the second insight?
The second insight was the ability to see the death and rebirth of beings throughout the cosmos.
Wow.
So it gave him this vast panoramic view of the cycle of life and death.
Okay.
And the interconnectedness of all beings.
So he wasn't just focused on his own individual liberation.
Right.
He was really seeing the bigger picture.
Yes.
This kind of universal nature of suffering and the possibility of freedom.
Exactly.
Okay.
And then the third insight, and this is the one that really distinguished his teachings, was the insight into the ending of mental effluence.
Okay.
Or asavas.
Now, remember we were talking about the Jains earlier?
Yeah, they talked about asavas too, right?
They did, but they saw asavas as these physical substances clinging to the soul.
Okay. The Buddha redefined this concept.
Okay.
He saw asavas as mental patterns.
Okay.
The clinging.
Yeah.
The becoming.
Okay.
The ignorance that keeps us bound to this cycle of suffering.
So it's not about some kind of external force or substance that's keeping us trapped. It's really about our own internal patterns of thought and behavior.
That's a huge shift in perspective.
It is.
And this understanding was really key to his formulation of the Four Noble Truths.
Okay.
The truth of suffering, the truth of the origin of suffering, the truth of the cessation of suffering, and the truth of the path to the cessation of suffering.
Yes, the Four Noble Truths, like the cornerstone of Buddhist thought. But I have to admit, I still struggle a little bit with how this all relates back to that idea of this debt conditionality we were talking about earlier.
Yeah, that's a great question.
Like, how do the Kama and the Asavas and these Four Noble Truths all kind of fit into that framework?
Right. So remember, the debt conditionality, or idapakaya, describes how linear and synchronic causality intersect to influence every event.
Yeah.
So it's like this multidimensional web of cause and effect where past actions create conditions for present experiences. And present actions shape our future.
So it's not just a simple straight line from cause to effect.
Right.
It's more like this complex, interwoven tapestry of influences.
Exactly. And this understanding of idapakaya is crucial because it shows us how we can actually work with Kama and Asavas to achieve liberation. It means that we're not simply bound by our past actions. We actually have the power to change our present and future.
Right.
Through skillful action and mindful awareness.
So it's not like a hopeless situation. We're not just robots playing out a predetermined script.
Not at all. And this brings us to one of the most fascinating aspects of the Buddha's teachings.
What's that?
The fact that he chose to teach at all.
Well, wait, why is that so fascinating? I mean, wouldn't it be natural for someone who's discovered something this profound to want to share it with others?
Well, remember, this conditionality involves both linear and synchronic causality.
Right.
So because it wasn't purely linear, the Buddha was able to achieve liberation in his own lifetime. He didn't have to wait for all of his past karma to play itself out.
I see. So the synchronic aspect allowed for a more immediate transformation.
Right.
But then why didn't he just disappear into the ether upon enlightenment?
Well, that's where the linear aspect comes in.
Because
it wasn't purely synchronic. He still had some past karma that was influencing his experience. And this is why he continued to live and teach even though he had achieved complete liberation.
So this blend of causal forces allowed him to both achieve enlightenment and also share that experience with others.
That's right.
That's pretty amazing.
Yeah.
But why did he feel the need to teach in the first place?
Well, the Buddha recognized that the complexity of that conditionality could be really bewildering for most people.
Yeah, I could imagine.
It's like trying to untangle a massive knot. You don't even know where to start.
Absolutely. I can definitely relate to that.
Right. And this bewilderment often leads to suffering.
Right.
People try to escape this discomfort through all sorts of unskillful means, clinging to things that offer temporary relief, but ultimately perpetuate the cycle of suffering.
So the teachings are kind of like a guide.
Yes.
A map to help us navigate this complex terrain.
Exactly.
To find a path to genuine happiness and liberation.
Exactly. They illuminate the true nature of this causal system. So we can start to understand it, work with it skillfully, and ultimately break free from the patterns that keep us trapped.
That makes a lot of sense. But how did the Buddha approach the fact that, we all come to this with different backgrounds?
Right.
Different karmic baggage, so to speak?
Right.
How did he account for that diversity of experience?
Well, that's where the concept of utility comes in. So because this conditionality allows for present moment input, it means we actually have a degree of free will. our actions in the present
Yeah.
can actually shape our future experiences.
So it's not a hopeless situation. We're not just robots playing out this predetermined script.
Exactly. And because this principle of that conditionality is impersonal, meaning it applies to everyone equally,
Okay.
the Buddha realized that his teachings could potentially benefit anyone regardless of their past actions or circumstances.
So everyone has this capacity for liberation.
Yes.
It's just a matter of learning the right skills and putting them into practice.
Exactly. And that brings us to the function of the teachings themselves.
Okay.
So the Buddha wasn't interested in creating some rigid dogma or a purely philosophical system.
So it's not about blindly accepting a set of beliefs.
Not at all. He saw his teachings as skillful tools means to an end.
Okay.
They're meant to guide us towards a direct experience of reality, to help us cultivate the mental qualities that are needed for liberation.
So the teachings themselves are part of the path, not the destination.
Exactly. And this emphasis on skillful action, on actually working with the causal system to achieve liberation, is woven throughout all of his teachings.
Okay, so if we're talking about tools, it seems like having a well-organized toolbox is pretty important.
It is.
How did the Buddha structure his teachings to kind of address all of these different needs and perspectives?
Right. That's where I think the genius of his approach really shines through.
Okay.
So because the stat conditionality involves those feedback loops we talked about,
Yeah.
the same causal connection can actually manifest in different ways,
Okay.
depending on the individual and their circumstances.
So one size doesn't fit all when it comes to spiritual growth.
Exactly. And this is reflected in the organization of the Buddha's teachings.
Okay.
He offered a variety of different explanations,
Uh-huh.
different ways of understanding these causal links that lead to suffering and the path to its cessation.
Okay, so that kind of explains why there are so many different Buddhist schools and interpretations, right?
Exactly. It's not that one is right and the others are wrong.
Uh-huh.
They're all addressing different facets of the same underlying reality.
Okay.
Much like different tools in a toolbox are used for different purposes.
So it's about finding the approach that resonates most deeply with you
Right.
and your own experience.
Exactly. And speaking of experience, let's talk about the content of the teachings.
Okay.
One of the most radical aspects of the Buddha's approach is his emphasis on the mind.
The mind.
He argues that the same causal forces operating in the universe at large
Okay.
are also at play in the way our minds process experience.
So as above, so below.
Precisely. And he emphasizes that the key to liberation lies in carefully observing those mental processes, the
Okay.
way we perceive, think, and feel in each moment,
Okay.
becoming aware of those internal patterns that keep us trapped in suffering, those asavas we were talking about earlier.
So the solution isn't out there somewhere. It's right here in our own minds.
Exactly. And this brings us to the presentation of the teachings.
Okay.
The Buddha understood that his students were already caught in this web of that conditionality.
Right.
So he had to tailor his approach accordingly.
Okay.
He had to meet people where they were at.
You can lead a horse to water, but you can't make it drink.
Exactly. He had to inspire faith in his students and help them see that his path was worth following.
Okay.
And he did this through his impeccable character, sometimes through displays of psychic powers,
Okay.
but most often through reason and skillful communication.
So it's not about blind faith. It's about presenting the teachings in a way that makes sense, that resonates with people's own experiences and understanding.
Exactly. And he understood that ultimately true understanding had to come from direct experience,
Right.
not just intellectual assent.
So the teachings are really just a starting point,
Yes,
a catalyst for our own inner exploration.
precisely. And that brings us to the wings to awakening themselves.
Okay.
As the Buddhist teachings grew more vast and complex,
Yeah.
he realized that there was a need for a more concise and essential distillation of his message.
Okay.
Something that would endure, something that would speak to the core of the human experience.
Okay, and that's where these 7 lists of mental qualities come in?
Exactly. He chose to focus on mental qualities because they're universally relatable.
Okay.
They're present to some degree in every human mind.
Okay.
They transcend cultural differences, historical contexts.
So it's like he's providing us with this set of universal keys to unlock our own potential.
Precisely. And each list, although approaching the path from a slightly different angle,
Yeah.
ultimately leads to the same goal, the realization of the Dhamma and the experience of unbinding.
So it's not about finding like the one true list,
Right.
but rather the one that speaks most clearly to you and your own path.
Exactly. And this leads us to the final piece of the puzzle, the role of the monastic order, or the Vinaya.
All right, so how does that fit into all of this? So we've been talking about the monastic order or the Vinaya.
Right.
I'm curious how it connects to everything we've been talking about.
Well, the Buddha recognized that simply having teachings wasn't enough.
Okay.
He knew that they needed a structure to support them,
Oh, okay.
a living embodiment of the Dhamma,
Yeah.
and that's where the monastic community comes in.
So it's not just about individual practice.
Uh-huh.
It's also about having this community to support and inspire you on the path.
Exactly. The monastic order provides a model for living ethically, for cultivating those mental qualities that we've been discussing.
Right.
It's a space where people can dedicate themselves fully
Yeah.
to practicing the Dhamma and embodying those teachings in their daily lives.
And it's not just for monks and nuns, right?
No.
Lay people can also benefit from interacting with the monastic community.
Absolutely. That interaction can take many forms.
Okay.
Attending teachings, offering donations,
Yeah.
or simply having conversations with monks and nuns.
Right.
All of these interactions can provide lay people with valuable guidance and inspiration on their own spiritual journeys.
It's like this ripple effect.
Uh-huh.
The positive energy and wisdom of the monastic community radiating outwards into society.
Exactly.
It's a beautiful image, and it actually reminds me of something we were talking about earlier.
Okay.
How the Buddha himself achieved enlightenment, but didn't just vanish into the ether.
Right.
He remained present in the world,
Yeah.
teaching and guiding others.
And that leads us to, I think, another really powerful aspect of his legacy.
Okay.
His final act of passing into total unbinding or parinibbana.
You know, I've always found this part a little bit perplexing.
Yeah.
Why would someone who dedicated his life to helping others choose to seemingly withdraw completely?
Right. Well, it's important to remember that for the Buddha, true happiness doesn't come from external circumstances.
Okay.
It's not about clinging to anything, even to the idea of helping others.
Okay.
True happiness comes from within,
Okay.
from the complete liberation that comes with unbinding.
So his parinibbana was a final demonstration of that truth.
Exactly. He was showing that ultimate liberation doesn't need any external justification.
Okay.
It's not about seeking rewards or recognition.
Right.
It's about fully embracing the boundless freedom of unbinding.
So it's like he's saying, I've shown you the way, now it's up to you to walk the path.
Precisely. And that brings us full circle back to those 7 lists of mental qualities.
Okay.
The wings to awakening.
Right.
They are his legacy, his final gift to humanity.
Yeah.
A roadmap to that same freedom that he embodied so fully.
Wow. Okay, so we've covered a lot of ground here. We've gone from the luxury of Prince Siddhartha's palace to the depths of the Buddha's enlightenment,
Right.
from the intricacies of karma and the stat conditionality to the practical wisdom of the wings to awakening.
Yeah, it's been quite a journey.
My brain is bursting with new insights.
Mine too.
And I think that's what makes this deep dive so valuable. It's not just an intellectual exercise.
Right.
It's really an invitation to embark on our own journey of self-discovery, to cultivate those qualities that lead to true happiness and freedom.
I completely agree.
And as we wrap up, I think it'd be great to leave our listener with a final thought-provoking question.
Okay.
Knowing that the Buddha meticulously chose these specific teachings as his legacy, which of the 7 lists of mental qualities resonates most with you and why?
That's a great question to ponder.
And as you explore those 7 lists, further remember that the path to genuine happiness is open to all.
It is.
So keep diving deep, keep exploring, and keep awakening to your own true nature.
Absolutely.
Until next time.